This conference
right.
will now be recorded.
Welcome, everybody, to the May 6th, 2020 meeting of the South Whitehall Township of Commissioners. This is, I believe, our third virtual meeting, and I hope we find all of you safe and well this evening. Thank you for joining us. I would like to start our meeting off by calling it to order with a roll call vote. We do need to start doing roll call votes prior to starting the meeting. This is a part of the new Senate Bill 841, Act, I think, 115, which Attorney Zader is going to talk a little bit about at the onset of the meeting. So before we do our Pledge of Allegiance, Renee, would you please do the roll call vote just to show the attendance this evening from the commissioners?
So,
I think you're on mute, Renee.
sorry, my computer keeps going out. Do you
No
need
problem.
a roll? I couldn't hear anything you said.
Yeah, I said yes. I said, could you do a roll call vote before we go into the different agenda items, please? Thank you.
Sure. Commissioner Walk,
Yes, hi.
Commissioner Kelly, Diane Kelly here.
Please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign.
I'm pretty sure she had joined. Diane, are you on the line?
To enable audio control, please enter this conference will now be recorded.
Why don't we,
Having a lot of lag, so maybe.
yeah,
just
keep
hold on
going,
one
Renee. We'll hit Diane on the end of the list.
Commissioner Mobilio.
Here.
Can you hear me now? Yes, we can.
All right. Okay, Commissioner Mobilia, you're here.
Yep.
All right, Commissioner Seton
Here.
and Commissioner Morgan.
Here. And you got Commissioner Kelly.
Correct.
Awesome. Thank you so much. As we do in all of our meetings, I think it's very important that we honor our country. So if everybody would please join in the Pledge of Allegiance. We do have a flag behind me here. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag of the United States of America, to the republic
from which it stands,
nation,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty. Thank you, everybody. All right. I'd like to note that all public sessions of the South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners are electronically recorded. The electronic record is kept until the minutes of the meeting are approved and destroyed if a request is not made to retain the electronic version at that time. At this point in the meeting, I'd like to take a short couple of minutes just to let Attorney Zader give a brief on the Senate Bill 841 and the Act 15 to let us all know how that affects our public meetings and what it means for all of us on the call today. So Attorney Zader, could you please give a brief on that?
Thank you, President Morgan. You may recall that at a prior meeting, I discussed how the Office of Open Records had rendered a written opinion with respect to the Sunshine Act and the conduct of public meetings virtually. And that was an opinion issued by a bureaucratic agency of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And it was consistent with the case law that I had researched, but there was some question as to what would happen if it got in front of a judge. So what has happened, you may recall that at prior meetings, I also had briefly touched on the House bill that was in play. And subsequently, there was a Senate Bill 841, that President Morgan just mentioned. Well, Senate Bill 841 has now been passed by the legislature and signed by Governor Wolf, having an effective date of April 20. And it's now known as Act 15 of 2020. And there are two aspects of this new legislation that impact municipalities such as South Whitehall Township. The first of those relates to the Sunshine Act in effect and other statutory provisions that have to do with public meeting. So what it does is it says that during the duration of the COVID-19 disaster emergency, effectively the duration of governmental order, that meetings are authorized by what are known as authorized telecommunications devices. And essentially that means any type of communication that is two-way at a minimum in an audio fashion. Certainly with the communication we have here for South Whitehall this evening, which is audio, and for those that choose to participate such way, it's also visual. It more than meets the requirement. The other thing it makes clear is that to have a quorum of the Board of Commissioners, it's not necessary that the quorum be physically present at the same location. Rather, as long as a quorum is present virtually, that would suffice. What it goes on to also state in the statute is that advance public notice of the meeting, to the extent practicable, should be posted on the township's website, in newspaper advertisement, or both. And the township has fulfilled that requirement. It says the public notice has to include the date, time, technology to be used, and public participation information. And the public needs to be provided with an opportunity to participate through the technology or by written comments, which would be submitted by mail or email in advance. And there are a few other provisions that really wouldn't apply to this evening's meeting. That covers the public meeting component of Act 15. There is another component of Act 15 that has applicability to municipalities, including South Whitehall Township, and that relates to developments and permits within a municipal agency. It applies to land development and subdivision submissions. It applies to zoning hearings. It applies to building type permits and many other types of applications and permits that might be submitted for in South Whitehall Township. And what the statute did is it's what's referred to as a tolling statute, suspension statute. There are certain requirements that exist for action to be taken by a municipality by operation of law. A zoning hearing, for example, must be conducted within 60 days of the application having been submitted. There's a time clock with respect to land development. There's a time clock with respect to many different types of permit action. What this does is it says for any permit submitted prior to March 6th, March 6th is the start time for the tolling period. And for any permits submitted after March 6th, that date is the beginning of the tolling period. And the tolling period goes through May 20th. In effect, what it means is that any application that's pending in the township during that 75-day window, it's as if the period within that 75-day window doesn't count. So when we get to May 20th, that time period would start up again wherever it left off, whether it's March 6th or some later point in time. And this is, of course, assuming that this statutory provision is not modified by subsequent legislation to continue this tolling period beyond May 20th. And there are certain notice requirements that are embedded into the statute. And I would just report to the board and to the public that the township staff has sent those public notices out as required by the law. My office worked with staff in coming up with the form of notice, and now I believe those notices have all been sent. That's my summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Zader. Much appreciated. I'd also like to note there were some questions at our last meeting on proper notification of our executive sessions. So we did confirm, and just for the record, we did have executive sessions on March 13th, 18th, 19th, and the 25th for the record to discuss legal matters. There was a date in question, and that was March 30th. That was, in fact, not an executive session, but it was a practice go-to meeting for the Board of Commissioners to learn how to use the go-to meeting practice. There was no business discussed at that meeting, so it wouldn't be an official executive session. I would like to note, though, however, the board did meet in executive session tonight, May 6th, to discuss personnel matters. That being said, we will move right into our agenda items for this evening. The first item on our agenda for consideration and possible action is our April 15th, 2020 Board of Commissioner meeting minutes. They are in the board's packet for consideration and possible action. Commissioner Walk was the only commissioner who was absent the day of this particular meeting, but the rest of the commissioners were present.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Questions? Thank you. There were no questions from the board on the meeting minutes? Hearing none, we do have a motion. I believe it was from Commissioner Mobilio. Do I hear a second for approval on the April 15th meeting minutes? Second. We have a second on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. All in favor? Could I have a roll call vote, please, Renee?
Sorry, yes. Commissioner Mobilio,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Seton.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan,
Aye.
and noting Commissioner Walk was an abstention.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next this evening for, these are two discussion items. Both are looking for a potential motion requesting permission to advertise. The first is an ordinance amending the South Whitehall Township zoning ordinance by amending section 350-24C5 R3 low density residential zoning district schedule, section 350-24C6 R4 medium density residential zoning district schedule, section 350-24C7 R5 medium density residential zoning district schedule, section 350-24C8 R10 high density residential zoning district schedule, and section 350-24C14 highway commercial 1 zoning district schedule to allow for a maximum height of 40 feet for residential buildings and providing for a severability clause, retention of rights to enforce clause, a repealer clause, and an effective date. This was a tabled ordinance from a previous meeting. George, I believe you have a presentation for us this evening to discuss a bit of a timeline on the actions that went along with where we got to today.
I gave that presentation at the last hearing. Is it the desire of the commission to hear that again?
I think there was some questions on a timeline from the last meeting in order for the board to make a decision on how to move forward with this.
So the commission at the last meeting, I think, asked us to put together what we thought was the history behind where the height requirements got to and how they got to them. Greg Adams from our office put that history together and provided that to you in your packet. It's pretty much as we had discussed last time. If you recall, Blake Marles actually interjected and talked a little bit about what he believed the history was from his recollection. Greg also talked a little bit about his knowledge of that history, with respect to how it laid out with fire service equipment and so forth. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Other than that, you have that history available to you. It is pretty much as was expressed at the last meeting.
And George, just to clarify that for the folks who weren't here, is it just referring to the information in the packet that the original driver of the existing 35-foot maximum height limitation was fire safety, but that the use of modern fire apparatus has all but eliminated that driver? Is that kind of in a nutshell?
Correct. That's pretty much in a nutshell, Matt. That's our recollection, and that's the history that we provided.
Were there any other questions or comments on this particular motion from the board?
I just want to make a comment. Go ahead.
Go ahead, okay. Commissioner Seton?
Again, I just wanted to make a comment that the request from the applicant to change the height is actually, I think, a very solid one, because they're currently using flat roofs, and they want to turn it from flat roofs into a pitch roof, which will definitely look better. So.
Thank you.
Like a wonderful
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Morgan. I had mentioned at our last meeting, so I'll review again for those on the call who might not have been. I am in support of amending the ordinance for the particular zone that the Sasaco development is needing, but since we are in the middle of a comprehensive plan and zoning update, it's my position that I'm not comfortable making a sweeping change through all of these categories and not understanding the effect of them in detail. That would be my recommendation.
Can I just, a question, I guess, off of what Commissioner Kelly said. Assuming this gets advertised, it comes back before us, assuming it gets approved, depending on the outcome of the comprehensive plan, there'll be maybe a recommendation that those height requirements change anyway. Is that correct?
Again, the comprehensive plan really doesn't get into that level of detail. What they would do is, as we're working through the comprehensive plan, we're now in the kind of where shall we grow phase. The next phase is going to be what should that growth look like, and there will certainly be discussion with respect to architectural types of things such as massing and height and setbacks and things like that. But it would be the zoning ordinance that would kind of drive those specific requirements depending on what those policies end up being at. So it's kind of hard to say right now. It's really going to depend on the public input we get through that particular phase of the comp plan update. But there certainly should be some inference or reference to specific heights in those areas as we further flesh out that comprehensive plan.
I guess what I should have said was, I think I was inarticulate when I said it. What I meant to say was, no matter what we do with regard to this request from the applicant, at the end of the comprehensive plan process, there may be additional changes recommended or adopted or whatever with regard to height requirements. So
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I mean, even if we approve it at somewhere down the line when it gets advertised and comes back before us, there's a possibility that zoning changes later, although this project would be grandfathered in based on that approval if we granted it, correct?
Yeah, you would have another look at the zoning ordinance after the comprehensive plan is finished, obviously, and then you would be able to look at all of our zoning districts in that respect.
Based right simply on your earlier comment, Commissioner Mobilio, the history of the change, and it makes perfect sense that if it's going to apply to one, why wouldn't it apply to all? So my opinion would be to make a motion to approve to advertise this modification, but I still want to keep the line open for any more comments from the board, and then also get any comments from the public. Is there any more comments from the board at this point?
Yes, this is Mike Walk. I have one. So I participated in the earlier meeting where the applicant showed us the drawings and his reason for the request. And I agree with his request, either on a one-off basis or I suppose for that zone. I also listened to the discussion at the last meeting, although I wasn't present. So I have the benefit of everything that was said at the last meeting. I'm kind of left with what is the compelling reason to change this for all zones at this time? I don't think we've heard that. We've heard one applicant's request. We've heard some zones have been changed for some reason. It wasn't done across the board. What is the compelling reason to do it right now as opposed to wait
Okay.
as
It's time for a
Commissioner Kelly.
cocktail. You ready for that? That begins right here.
That's not me.
Not me.
I muted him. Go ahead.
Oh.
I was done. I asked a question. What was the compelling reason for the change? Does someone have one? Does George or Greg have a reason why we're compelled to make this change tonight?
No, I mean, this is applicant driven, so I think that question probably needs to go to the applicant to see. I think I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think their rationale was to create a more architecturally pleasing structure versus
George,
versus one with a
which
lot of
zoning,
roof.
what, George?
Could I just clarify? Could I just clarify, because George gave that answer? I don't know if you heard, I said, I would approve the applicant's request for the reason they stated. My question was, what's the compelling reason that the township would have to change from 35 feet to 40 feet across all zones at this time?
I don't know. I don't know if there really is one. I mean, if that's it's totally the desire of the commission. If they just want to change a district or two districts, I think the applicant was looking for a change initially in the R5 and R10. If that's what y'all want to limit it to, that's perfectly fine. I don't know if there's any reason. I think the only reason we suggested that the other districts be included with the same thing was just for ease of use, basically, just so that it was consistent across the board.
Is it, you know,
But George, wouldn't the impact be the same across all of the districts? I mean, if it's 4, is it 4 feet that we're talking about? It's driven by originally what the fire service could do?
Well, so right now, Tori, some of the there's 4 districts that are capped at 35 feet. There are several other districts that are capped at 40 feet. So this would be affecting the ones that are capped at 35 feet, if you went with the whole lot. Otherwise, the applicant was really only initially asking for, again, R5 and R10. So if that's certainly fine. If that's, you know, what the commission wants to do. You know, at this point, you know, that this is kind of the motion to advertise. That can kind of, we can kind of work through that if there's some direction that the commission wants to take it in. You know, we can certainly work with that as part of the ordinance as we go through it.
I would imagine you would have done some research, though. I mean, if you recommended the other zoning districts be included in this, there was, you know, obviously, you know, I would assume there's a rhyme and reason. You don't just throw them in there. So if there's no impact and it's a matter of cleaning house a little bit to keep consistency, you know, that's what I'm curious about. So, you know, what's the downside to including those other districts?
Ms. Morgan, can I? This is
you know, again, we've talked about the you know, the initial reason or rationale for the 35 foot height limitation was that's the highest we could get with our fire apparatus. So that was the safety link, the safety nexus, if you will, to that particular requirement. That's not an issue now. So our thought was, if that's not an issue, maybe it could be consistent across the board, but it's really not a big deal either way, to be honest with you. However the commission wants to approach it, it's just
George,
is it or a citizen comment at this point?
David, Scott, I think, just so everyone's, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think any citizen comment should be either sent through chat or, I mean, we can't have people just talking out.
I'm sorry. Great, thank you.
I'm sorry, David. I didn't mean to. I'm not trying to be rude. It's just there's way too many people on the line if everyone starts talking at the same time.
No problem. I'll write my comment in the chat. I forgot about that.
George, just to be clear again, because we're not, and just to Mike Walk's point, if we approve this tonight, this is just to advertise. This is going to come back, and then at that time, if we decide, which I am in agreement that these other districts to be changed really it's not what the applicant's asking for. And technically, I mean, we have standing obviously to do it, but the applicant wouldn't, because they're not, you know, trying to build there. But assuming that we just agree to advertise it comes back to us in 2 weeks, then we can at that point put the restriction on it to just be limited to those zones that the applicant had initially requested. Is that fair?
I think so. And Matt, what I'll do for the commission, if you choose to advertise tonight, I'll put together just a chart with each district and the height that's currently, the height limitation that's currently in each of those districts. So you can see them all side by side on one sheet.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Any other comments or thoughts from the board? Okay, we did have a comment from the public. Mr. Burke asked, the applicant made his request on the basis of the 3-story architecture. Mr. Burke, if you want to unmute him, if he wanted to.
Thank you very much. I forgot about the protocol of the town. Yes, I made this comment at the last meeting. I was at the meeting where the contractor expressed the desire to increase the pitch of the roof, allow a 40-foot height. And that was based on the fact that he was talking about a townhouse with a lodge underneath and 2 stories above, which is essentially a 3-story building. And in that case, increasing the pitch, which was not a flat roof, but it was a slight slope to a larger slope, did increase the aesthetics of that particular building. And that was the basis of his request, that initial request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Were there any other questions or comments from anyone from the public?
Tori, would Greg Adams would like to weigh in a little bit on this also.
Absolutely. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Tori. To answer, I think, Mr. Walk's question, the staff impetus was consistency throughout the zoning districts. At this point, we're looking at 4 zoning districts that are 40 feet for residential, another 5, I believe, that are 35 feet. And then, of course, we have 3 or 4 districts that are at 70 feet, which are generally commercial industrial. So obviously, it's a little easier for staff to deal with this if all the residential districts are consistent. It's easier for the residents out there to understand that as well. So that's basically the concept for consistency. And I think Mr. Burke had a good comment. For the most part, the issue is not so much the roof as the basement. And I did point this out in the memo, that the way the township measures the height of buildings is they go from the top of the roof, the peak of the roof, to the average of grade. So if you have an at grade house, 35 feet goes from grade, which is basically top of foundation, to the roof. If you have a walkout basement, you're adding 4.5 to 5 feet to that height. That's generally something you wouldn't see when looking at it from the street. So that's basically the main driver, is walkout basements. If you have a walkout basement, you're then, if you're to go to 35 feet, you have to reduce your pitch or even go to a flat roof. Whereas if you add that extra 5 feet, you now have a pitched roof that looks the same as the buildings that don't have walkout basements. So that's basically my comments.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay, so to the board, I'd like to share something in terms of a visual that relates to this issue, because I was involved in it. If you can picture the vistas at Green Hills on both the north and south side of Clouser at the western edge of the township, Pulte Homes, when they were building that, had an interest in extending the height, such as Pasaco does here. But what they did instead was they approached the zoning hearing board and were unsuccessful. And then, based upon the construction timetable, they felt they did not have time to pursue an ordinance amendment with the township. So what they ended up doing was, on the north side of Clouser, they built what was referred to by Pulte Homes for a period of time as retaining wall city. an effort to deal with the height is determined, as Greg mentioned a moment ago. So on the north side of Clouser, you have somewhat pitched roofs with the twins and the townhouses. When you look to the south side of Clouser, which is a flatter area, doesn't have the same grade changes, you'll see that the roof pitches are shallow. They are not very peaked. And it's all because of this height definition that exists in the ordinance.
Okay.
That's it.
This is Mike Walk again. I have one more question or comment. So I know this question was asked and answered at the last meeting. I'm going to repeat it anyway. So to me, the greatest ramification or unintended consequence would be, even if it's just 5 feet, that we have an unintended consequence that developments increase their density because this adds an extra story on buildings. Now, at the last meeting, the answer was no, that wouldn't happen, taking all the dimensions into consideration. I'd just like to hear again and make absolutely certain that this will not allow an additional story and increased density in our development.
Yeah, that's correct, Mike. There's another code that also regulates the construction of residential homes. It's the Unified Construction Code set out by, it's really a universal code that the Commonwealth has adopted and is driven down to local municipalities to include. And we checked with the chief building official here and asked that very question of him, and he opined, and we also made the same opinion, or delivered the same opinion to the planning commission as they were considering it. And he believes that the Uniform Construction Code would prohibit an extra floor. So, and in fact, that code caps any residential unit at not more than 3 stories.
Thank you.
We do have another comment on the chat from Monica Hodges. Would you want to unmute? Did you have something you wanted to share with the board? No? Okay.
No, I'm
All
sorry.
right.
I talked. Thank you.
Oh, there you go. You're welcome. All right. If there's no further comment from the public or from the board, we are at a point at the discussion for a motion to move forward with permission to advertise the said ordinance. At this point, based on the discussion, in my opinion, I believe that out of a matter of consistency and for the fact that, the research that's been done by staff so far, I would make a motion to move forward with permission to advertise said ordinance.
I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Morgan, a second from Commissioner Stetton. Can I have a roll call vote, please, Renee? Commissioner Walk.
Aye.
Commissioner Mobilio.
I'm going to say aye, but I want to just put the caveat out there that my only concern here is that in the interest of consistency, we open ourselves up to, if we in the future grant another request in one particular district for another 5 feet up to 45 feet, then will the arguments continue that we should be consistent at every increment that we go higher and higher. So I will say aye for purposes of advertising, but I think that it deserves a little bit more discussion when we get to that point.
Commissioner Kelly.
I am going to vote aye with similar caveat to Commissioner Mobilio. I am in support of the Pizzacco request for the particular zones that affect the residential building that he has planned. That would be my aye.
Commissioner Stetton.
Aye.
And Commissioner Morgan. Aye. Motion carries with the permission to advertise. And, based on Commissioner Mobilio and Kelly's comments, George, I think you're going to be putting together some additional information for the board to gather up some more details on this potential impacts on the other zones.
Absolutely. And just for so to Commissioner Kelly's point, it would be R5 and R10, but I will put all of those, I'll put every zoning district into a chart with heights for both residential and commercial development.
Thank you. Thank you, George. All right, everyone. We have one more ordinance. This is, again, another discussion item with a potential motion requesting permission to advertise. It's an ordinance amending Chapter 304, Article 3, Street Excavations of the Codified Ordinances of South Whitehall Township to permit an applicant to request a waiver for the provisions of Section 304-26J and to provide for the severability, retention of rights to enforce, repealer, and the effective date. Mr. Harper, welcome this evening. Will you be presenting on this one?
Yes, I will be.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Just good evening. My name is Tom Harper, and I'm the Enforcement Program Manager for the Township. This ordinance is amending Chapter 304, Article 3, Section 304-26, the work in street right-of-way or township easements. This amendment will provide a new subsection, letter N, to the Section 304-26 for permitting of an applicant to seek a waiver from the requirements of, as stated, Section 304-26J. Subsection J of the current ordinance specifies permanent street restoration work that is required after the completion of any permitted excavation work that has been done to a township street. This restoration work is based upon the number, size, and location of street cuts or openings and provides regulations for the required work that must be completed to bring the road surface to a condition that will provide for the integrity of the road surface to last over a period of time. This section basically specifies that the milling and overlay of the street could result from a small area to resurfacing the whole street, depending on the number, size, and location of the cuts, if they cross the center line, etc. Therefore, under this amendment, it would allow the applicant to seek relief from these requirements by presenting their waiver request to the Board of Commissioners. And in the ordinance also, during the waiver review process, the amendment provides criteria for the Board of Commissioners to consider when making their decision for such a request. Note, though, that this waiver request does not relieve the applicant of complying with other requirements in Section 304-26. So that's what I have. So I just want to thank you. And at this time, if there's any questions regarding the amendment or waiver, I believe Randy, Herb, and I are available to answer them.
Tom,
Yes.
I have a quick question. So if this section N weren't there, what are the impacts on an applicant? Like what happens with this not there? What's the impetus?
They would have to conform to what is in the ordinance regarding the section J1 and J2, primarily that if there's 2 or more cuts, etc., 100 feet apart, it specifies what they would have to do as far as resurfacing the road, milling and overlay, whether it's a small section or the whole street itself.
So it's black and white. So what this ordinance modification would do would give some waiver and some flexibility to somebody who had this work done, and that would be the ultimate decision of the board.
That is correct. They would have to seek relief from the board.
Based on recommendation from staff.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions from the board?
Tom, I had a question. In the third from the last sentence of section N, it states that the applicant would need to provide services to a property or area in the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience. Can you explain what the word convenience and what that means in light of this particular ordinance?
The convenient aspect, and correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, dealt with providing a service to a neighborhood.
That's correct. Part of the concern with this ordinance, both from utility suppliers and the township, is how can I put it? It makes it difficult to provide new services to residents. For example, UGI with a new gas hookup for a neighborhood. This ordinance was very strict and obviously continues to be, but it makes it very difficult for them to come in and install new service to the residents. So one of the things that has kind of triggered this is a request from UGI to install, actually a request from residents for UGI to install new gas in their neighborhood down in the Bungalow Park area. UGI came to the township and explained their concern with our ordinance and essentially said the stipulations of it would essentially crush the project for them and would essentially crush other projects in the township for new service. As staff, we feel we don't want to handcuff our residents or utility suppliers. We want to give everybody a fair chance to hook up to gas if the neighborhood wants that. That's kind of what's triggering this. That's it in a nutshell, quite honestly. But you know, if they had to restore the entire road, curb to curb, for the entire length of the road for a few minor cuts in the roadway, then obviously the cost of the restoration would jeopardize their project in whole. And the residents obviously would not get gas then.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation.
Sure.
Any other questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public on this particular topic?
Tori, I don't have any in the chat.
Nope, I don't see any either. That being said, do I hear? Sorry, just heard somebody.
Yeah, I'm actually one of the contractors on this call, and I believe that discussion was in regard to what I had been talking to James Balliott and also Randy about. So I'm not sure if I was supposed to, you know, state my case here or just kind of let you guys hash it out as far as what we just talked about.
No, Joe, is this Joe Natali?
Yes, yes.
Joe, it's Randy. How you doing? Hey, you're actually
Good.
on the
How are you?
agenda a little bit later on. This one wasn't for you. You're down the line.
Oh,
here.
okay.
But no worries.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So if there's no other questions or comments, we do have the opportunity for a motion for permission to advertise said ordinance. Do I hear said motion?
So moved.
We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Mobilio. Can I have a roll call vote, please, Renee? Sure. Commissioner Walk?
Aye.
Commissioner Mobilio?
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly? Aye. Commissioner Stetton?
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Randy. All right. Next this evening, we're going to go into our resolutions. We have 3 resolutions for consideration and possible adoption this evening. The first is a resolution appointing Barry Isett and Associates as the alternate commercial code inspector for South Whitehall Township. George.
Yes, commissioners, this is Steve, you took it away from me, Steve. So we have Key Codes is currently our primary commercial inspector, and Barry Isett, who was code master in the past, is our primary residential inspection service. This is just providing the alternate. This resolution and the next resolution is just flipping them as alternates for each other. So where Barry Isett is the primary for residential inspections, this would allow Key Codes to be the alternate should Barry Isett not be able to fulfill a duty for some reason or another. I don't think we've ever had an issue where an alternate's had to step in, but at least since I've been here. And then for this particular resolution, for the first one, A, This would make Barry Isid Associates the alternate commercial code inspector for South Whitehall should key codes not be able to perform their function.
And their fee schedules attached to the essential resolution.
And the alternates have agreed to adhere to the primary's fee schedules so there's no increase or decrease in any payments to the third party.
Thank you. Thank you, George. Are there any questions from the board on this particular request? Are there any questions from the public? All right, that being said, do I hear a motion this evening to appoint Barry Isid and Associates as the alternate commercial code inspector?
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Seton. We have a second from Commissioner Kelly. Can I have a roll call vote, please, Renee? Commissioner Walk.
Aye.
Commissioner Mobilio.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly. Aye. Commissioner Seton.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. All right. Next this evening for consideration and possible action, we have a resolution appointing key codes as the alternate residential code inspector for South Whitehall Township. George.
Yes, very similar to the last one. It's just now key codes would become the alternate for residential purposes.
Again, with the same fee schedule?
Correct.
Same. Yep. All right. Are there any questions or comments from the board on this particular request? Any from the public? All right. That being said, do I hear a motion to move forward with appointing key codes as the alternate residential code inspector? So moved. We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I'll make a second. Second from Commissioner Morgan. Can I have a roll call vote, please? Commissioner Walk.
Aye.
Commissioner Mobilio.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly. Aye. Commissioner Seton.
Aye.
And Commissioner Morgan. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, George. All right. Last but not least this evening, under resolutions for consideration, we have a resolution approving the sewer planning module for the KRE Springview Commercial 4590 Broadway. And I have Mr. Mike Elias and Randy up for this one. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
We'll let Mike tackle this one. Go ahead, Mike.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Mike.
This is a 3,400 square foot quick service restaurant being proposed for the, I believe, southeast corner at Broadway and Citronia. The sewer allocation is 10 EDUs, which is the equivalent of 2,230 gallons per day. A note on the project, since Broadway was paved, we had the sewer service to this lot extended beyond the curb line so that this won't have to be dug up again to connect. So that's basically the long and short of the project right now.
Thank you, Mike.
Just to jump in a little bit too, this is very similar to the last requests that were in front of the board at the last public meeting presented by our engineer from SSM. But Mike did a great job explaining it there.
Thank you. Thanks, Randy. Thanks, Mike. Are there any questions or comments on this particular resolution for consideration this evening from the board? Are there any questions or comments from the public? All right. That being said, do I hear a motion to move forward approving the sewer planning module for the KRE Springview commercial property at 4590 Broadway? So moved. We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Sutton. All in favor? Roll call vote, please. Renee?
Commissioner Walk,
Aye.
Commissioner Mobilio,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly.
Aye.
Commissioner Sutton,
Aye.
and Commissioner Morgan.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
All
you to
right.
the board and staff.
Have a great evening. All right. Next this evening, under our motions, we have two motions for consideration. The first is a motion requesting permission to advertise for concrete work to be completed in the Covered Bridge Park. So Mike Cookitz is with us this evening. Hi, Mike. And Randy is also here to support this discussion. Gentlemen?
Hello, hello. I'm going to lead this one off. Mike's going to jump in where necessary as well. Before we jump into a lot of this, I just wanted to give a brief history of this project. Back in 2014, the township did a master plan study of Covered Bridge Park. This project was actually titled Phase A of the Covered Bridge Park master plan. So we've been in fundraising stages here for a few years, working with our Parks and Recreation Board to fine tune this project. We received a $250,000 grant from DCNR in 2018. 2019 was kind of our planning year, and now we're getting into this construction phase here, or close to it, I should say. Mind you, I understand these are unprecedented times. I understand the timing of this project may not be ideal, but I did want to explain the budget very, very carefully, just to bring some ease to the board, hopefully, and the public as well. This is a big project. There's $610,000 budgeted for this project. $250,000 of that is supplied by DCNR grant. We've also got about like 12,000 in sponsorship dollars, I believe. And we're proposing it's already approved in the budget, but $350,000 in our open space fee, or fund, I mean. So this is not a general fund supported project. And what I mean by that is it's not necessarily tax dollars that are going towards this project. So the monies that are set aside for this can't really be used to support other services of the township, filling in potholes, paving streets, what have you. So I wanted to just put that out there to explain kind of how this is being paid for, or we're proposing for this to be paid for. Steve, can you go ahead and open up the memo here? I think it's going to be your first, yeah, that one there. So just to touch on this bid a little bit and how we're structuring this so we can really pick and choose exactly what we'd like to do down here, staying within our budget here. The base bid is going to include the 8-foot main walkway. This is a color concrete sidewalk with a 6-inch colored border along the edge. We've also got 2 5-foot wide plain concrete sidewalks that will take playground users from the playground site up to a future bathroom site. That bathroom's kind of on hold right now, but we'll discuss that at a later date. And then the third base bid item here is a colored concrete perimeter edge around the proposed play areas. And what that is that's just meant to contain the mulch. We're not doing a rubberized poured in place surface for this project. We're going to stick with the playground mulch to keep costs down, and also mainly cost, but seeing that we are in a floodplain here, we want to make sure that the surface is going to last. It's going to be something we do need to replenish, but a rubberized surface playground surface would obviously get filled in with sediment over the years and would be a lot more expensive to fix than just throwing some more mulch down. So that's the thought behind it. We've also got 4 additional alternate items in this bid. The first item would be a plain concrete picnic area pad with 6-inch colored concrete border. The second would be the construction of 1 pavilion and the required footers for that pavilion. And the third alternate item would be a nature themed stamping on that main walkway down the middle of the playground. That's something we actually put in our DCNR grant and something the state's looking forward to. Hopefully we're able to award that. And then the fourth alternate item here is the textured stamping of the concrete perimeter edging. That's that edging that's going to contain the mulch, and that's just meant to kind of spruce it up a little bit, make it look a little bit nicer. This bid does seek qualified contractors to provide and furnish all the labor, supervision, and necessary materials and equipment to complete construction of this work. With that said, I'll take questions on this. I'm sure there's a bunch, but Steve, if you wouldn't mind going back, kind of maybe showing the next set of attachments here. This, when this comes up here, it's maybe a little tough to see. Scroll down. Keep going, keep going. One more. One more. This one here. So this, all the shaded, oh, stay there. Thank you. All the shaded green areas are what would be included in this bid. The township's going to be doing a lot of the excavation work. The playground will be installed by a certified playground installation company through CoStars. But the main excavation work and any necessary demolition work done township. Can you go to the next set of photos, please, Steve? I think these are the pretty renderings. So you can kind of see here, it's the area will change drastically. This is the 5 to 12 area. We've got, you know, quite a different few swings here. We've got some music elements. There's a nice zip line in there for the kids, which we're pretty excited about. I think they're going to love it. You know, and some of the comments we really got out of the Parks and Rec board was big slides, lots of slides, obviously, things like that for the kids to enjoy. We do have some benches, trash cans, and picnic tables included in this design as well. Can you go to the next one, Steve? This next rendering is of the 2 to 5 area. So this is obviously for the younger kids, a little bit more manageable play structures for them. You know, they get a little intimidated with those tall slides and taller structures. So wanted to do something for the younger children as well. Next slide, please. And I believe this is just an overall photo of what this site looks like. It doesn't include the parking lot at the top of the picture, you know, and landscaping and things like that. But so that's kind of what we're looking to do here. We're not asking for the playground equipment tonight. That's actually would be purchased through CoStars, but we want to make sure we see what these bids come back in first before we finalize the playground equipment. If bids come back cheaper, we should be able to get this entire design done here. If they come back a little over bid, we may need to go back to the playground company we're working with and fine tune some of these pieces. So that's kind of why we're starting with the concrete bid here.
Randy, just not a question, but more of a comment. First of all, I'm continuously impressed by the imagination and the passion that you have and that the Parks Department in South Whitehall Township has for really beautifying the township and providing these types of things for families to congregate. I mean, I think it's fantastic. But I think what got buried in your opening presentation, which I think is important for everyone on this call to know, and I wish there were more people, although I see it's a pretty good turnout, is that the money that's been allocated for this project is from the budget that was generated from 2019, and that the money that's for this project is in the Park and Rec budget. This is not money that is just sitting in a general fund where we could say, wait a minute, you know, what if we have reduced tax revenues? If we have shortfalls in other areas, we could use this money from Parks and Rec or use this money from this fund. This is money that's been earmarked for this project. If it doesn't get used this year for this project, it's going to be used next year for this project or the year after that. But more importantly, we have time frames with which we need to use the grant money that's provided to the township in order to keep the grant money. So it's important, I think, because we're all concerned about financial resources. We're all concerned about what tomorrow holds, for everyone to know that this is not a, hey, we're gonna go find money in the budget to do this great park. This is stuff that's been allocated, and if we don't do it now, there's a possibility that it doesn't get done and we lose the funding that we've had, and yet we have this money sitting here that can only be spent on this type of a project. Is that fair to say?
That's correct, and thank you for elaborating on that. Yeah, and I apologize if I was talking through this a little too fast here. It's something Mike and I have been working on for a long time. We're both very passionate about it, but That's absolutely correct. This is, and quite honestly, there's other things that, I don't want to say pushed off until, future. Understanding this is a big project. Public Works is going to be doing a lot of this work in-house. We've been planning for this. We've been planning for our staff to have the time to be down at the park and doing some of this excavation, hauling of the material out of there. So, it's certainly the timing. The timing may not look good, but it is actually good. And I know that may be difficult for some to understand, but in terms of our workforce and the grant monies that we currently have, we certainly would like to move forward with this project this summer.
Randy, thank you. And I definitely mirror Commissioner Mobilio's comments. There's been a lot of energy and passion, and I think it was very important to further explain the funding and how this has all been planned out over the years. Were there any questions from the board? I do have a question on the chat from the public, but were there any questions from the board first regarding this particular project?
I do have a question, Commissioner Morgan. Excuse me, Randy. For the grant money that we're talking about for this, when does that grant, when was awarded and when does it expire?
Would have been awarded in 2018. So 21, 22, Mike, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, 21, I believe it would be.
Okay, thank you for that. I will echo Commissioner Mobilio. It certainly is a wonderful design that you have come up with the assistance of the Parks and Rec Committee. So I will commend you for that. But I do want to ask, I have a concern with obviously our public works needing to do work there, excavation, demolition, in a time when we're certainly under quarantine. I'm concerned that we're going to have our workers, whether it's public works staff or township employees, out working under still, apparently Governor Wolf looks like we'll be in the yellow zone for a little while this next few months, with masks, gloves, and 6 feet distance, hand washing stations, etc. But I guess bigger than that also, it's certainly a concern for me. On the grant money, I know that the state is discussing extensions because of the COVID situation that we're all in, where obviously a lot of townships and boroughs, communities are in a similar situation as we are. But on the positive side, I know that Covered Bridge Park is a park during this quarantine period that many of our community are utilizing on a daily basis for passive recreation, enjoying the open space, walking, fishing. And I question the timing if we need to be doing construction in the near future. We have a playground there now that once the governor lifts the order, we can certainly take the tape off and our community can begin to enjoy it immediately. And I'm wondering what would be the hardship we've already paused the bathroom installation here at the park. What is the harm tonight to pause this project until we're through with our quarantine pandemic from COVID so that the community can continue to enjoy this park?
Yeah, so,
I guess,
nope, go ahead.
The question is, how disruptive will it be to the public?
Sure. Yeah. So we would have a construction entrance coming in off of the main driveway right there, off near the covered bridge, and after that, the area would be roped off, caution taped off. It would be secured. We wouldn't be looking to close any parking lots or anything like that. So the public would not be losing any parking opportunities, really any walking opportunities. It's really in a park that's I don't want to say underutilized, but it is for the most part a large grass field. The handball courts, obviously, they need to be removed in order to get this built here, and the old playground as well. But in terms of an impact to the park itself, I still feel we can continue to allow people to park at the existing parking lot to access the trail going through, as well as the pavilions and fishing as well. So I don't foresee us needing to close that driveway. And obviously we'll keep that site in a safe working manner. And in terms of our, you brought up a great point too, Diane, about Public Works, and for, you know, as far as the equipment operators go, they're going to be, as they are now, designated to a piece of equipment. They're not to share equipment. If there is a reason for them to share that equipment, we've instructed them all that they have to disinfect that equipment and any community touch buttons on that equipment. The guys that are hauling the material out, they're not sharing trucks. So for them, you know, I mean, for the most part, and Herb can touch on this as well, it's certainly, we have that part of it under control. We're continuing operations right now throughout the township, and making sure that our staff are keeping a safe distance from each other and not sharing equipment.
Well, and Randy, didn't the governor just on last Friday lift the restrictions on construction activities in the state?
That's correct, yes. And obviously we're going to continue trying to keep our staff safe. So we're going to continue those practices as long as this virus is around.
Well, they're lifted, but they still need to practice social distancing and masks, and there's a limit to how many people can be on the site at a time, I believe. But I know that's all changing as daily almost. But again, I just wanted to restate my point that tearing down our existing playground and handball court in a time where our community is needing it, to me, it's a timing issue, and I'm not sure what the hardship would be to pause this as we've paused the bathroom. And certainly if we're talking about Public Works doing demolition and helping with the site work, you know, again, we're talking about watching our budget and being careful with spending because of a revenue drop. Certainly assigning Public Works to be doing this at this time. Randy, I know that you have planned it all out, but unfortunately, COVID has changed a lot of plans for a lot of people. It's been the largest disruptor in our lifetime. I know this would be a difficult decision to put on hold, but I believe as far as the community keeping the park open as it is currently would best serve the needs of our community at this time.
Just to add one thing to, well, a couple things to what Commissioner Kelly said. First of all, I'm glad to hear Commissioner Kelly speak out about how, you know, we're utilizing our labor force in the township, because that's an issue that I'm going to talk about later today. But in addition,
I'm sorry, would you restate that, Commissioner Booth? I couldn't hear you.
I said I'm glad to hear you speak out about how we're utilizing the labor force, utilizing the township employees and staff, and making sure that we're prioritizing the type of work that they're doing. And going back to a comment that you made about tearing down handball courts, tearing down the handball court and the park area, I can tell you as a father of three, I have twins that are 3, I have an 8-year-old daughter. We've been down at Pebble Bridge Park numerous times. That player is not very usable. I don't think I've ever seen anyone playing handball. That court is dilapidated. The park equipment that's there is, some of it's usable, but if you look at the plans carefully, you'll see that the design is actually very well intended for social distancing, because what Randy and Parks and Rec have done a great job of is that it is not the type of cramped, consolidated park like you'll see at Cedar Beach. It is actually well spaced, keeping people far away. And Randy, my understanding is if all went well, the project will actually be done by the fall. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that would be our goal. There's a 4-week turn. I mean, if we were to get this bid awarded in, let's say, Mike, I don't remember what the time frame was. Was it June sometime?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So if this gets awarded in June, you know, we would then obviously to go through those motions, and then we'd work with the playground supplier to fine tune any equipment. That's got a 4-week turnaround. We'd be looking to break ground in August, and I think the contractor for the playground is saying what, a 3 to 5 week build time? Mike?
Yeah, around a month or so. Absolutely. Yep.
Before they were to get started, we'd be in there doing excavation. Our permit should be in hand here shortly. We've got an approved DNS plan from the Conservation District. So yes, a lot of this behind the scenes work to get to this point is accomplished already. You know, and to your point, Commissioner Mobilio, too, you know, the one thing we heard is, you know, to have a little bit more space to kind of run. You know, a lot of times when communities do these big playground projects, it is very condensed. It can be a little overwhelming, quite frankly. As a parent too, you want to keep your eye on your kid, and sometimes in those mass equipment fields right there, it gets a little tough to see them. So that was also taken into consideration. And I wasn't part of the master plan in 2014, but I'm assuming there's a reason they labeled this as phase A for that master plan. I do know that parking and parking, restrooms, and a nicer playground were some of those main items that were mentioned during that public input process back in 2014.
That's absolutely true, Randy. That was the public's desire. Absolutely.
I want to add one more thing, and then I'm done. I want to belabor the point. You know, there was, when we were deciding whether to continue to hold meetings in person for the Board of Commissioners or switch to virtual. And one of our fellow commissioners made the point that by being in person, which I think we all agree now is probably not wise, but at the time it was a concern, a question. Maybe we should still meet in person. Maybe we should do it virtual. We don't know. By meeting in person, we could serve as kind of a beacon of hope to the township and let them know that we weren't afraid, that we weren't going to be kind of overwhelmed by this virus. I think this type of a project that's already had money allocated to it, already has grant money allocated to it, is already in process, the wheels are in motion, would serve as a beacon of hope to the township residents to say, yes, we are in a crisis. Yes, we have serious concerns, but we are not going to allow it to dampen our spirits, to, you know, destroy the future for our children. We're going to move forward with those projects that we can do because they're already funded, and find, you know, still tighten our belts on those issues that aren't, or those projects aren't. I think this shows that we're not going to just hide in a corner. We're not going to hide under a rock, and we're going to move forward to make sure that the township residents, when we emerge from this, have a beautiful, safe, and great place to raise our children. I think this is a great way to show, considering the fact the money's already there and we've already gotten a huge chunk in a grant, to show that we're going to emerge from this and we're going to emerge stronger than ever.
Thank you, Commissioner Mobilio.
Thank you, Matt. This is Mike Walk. I've waited, you know, let everybody else have their Q&A period here. So I'd like to start mine. I have a few interrelated questions. Like the others, I'll start congratulating Randy on the fine job with the work to date, the design of this playground, and honestly, the excellent work that you do for everything for the township across all the parks, playgrounds, recreation. It's truly admirable, the work that you and, you know, the other team members do. I happened to attend the September 9th, 2019 meeting where we reviewed the bids and selected this contractor for this playground. My perspective on this, and this is going to be the orientation for all of my questions. It will be the pandemic. It will be the cost impact due to the pandemic on, you know, the township finances and the people in the township. I understand completely what you said, that there are separate funds for this. Nevertheless, I'd like to go through just a few questions. What's the total cost of this playground project?
Mike, we have $610,000 budgeted. So I can restate where those, the grant is from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. That was for $250,000. We have $350,000 in the 22 budget through the open space account. And we also have, Mike, do you know the exact total in sponsorships right now off the top of your head?
I do not know off the top of my head the exact. It's right around $10,000 we've raised in sponsorships as well.
Okay. Which I think is actually what we budgeted for.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. What is the portion, we're paying this, on my notes, I have the amount we're paying the contractor, the primary contractor for the playground. What's the cost for the other South Whitehall Township expenditure, like for Public Works? See if my notes are correct.
Do you mean like the in-kind services, Mike? Like what?
You highlighted in the previous meeting that we have Public Works, and although the primary contractor is going to build a playground, we have the surrounding area, site prep, development, final site dressing, sidewalks, all that Public Works has to do.
Mike, do you have that up in front of you? I can try to find it here.
I will.
I'll help you out. In September, you said it was $70,000.
Okay.
That's still a good number?
No, I think it's probably more than that, actually. It's been revised quite a bit since that time, Commissioner Walk. Let me see if I can find it here. But
while you're looking, let me go to the next question.
Sure.
You said at the beginning, there's no tax dollars for this playground. And in other words, it's all coming from grants. There's no other South Whitehall Township revenue being used for this playground. Can you just confirm that?
Other than township forces doing some in-kind work, which is also supporting the grant. So when we wrote that grant, we did put in, I believe, $70,000, probably in in-kind services, but I think we're doing a little bit more than that now with the excavation.
Okay, so there is some tax funding for that portion?
Not from the general fund. No, I would say it would be just labor.
I'm asking about the source of the money.
I mean, we pay our Public Works employees through the general fund, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. Yes, that is what I'm asking. So there are some funds coming separate from this open space account to pay for a portion of the playground.
Staff time, correct.
Yep.
Okay.
Mike, I just wanted to clarify something. Is it your position that the use of time that the staff spends on a particular project is considered like an expenditure that we should take into consideration? In other words, we should be looking at, say, Public Works spends 100 hours towards a project. We should be looking at as a cost to the township. Is that what your suggestion is?
Well, actually, I'm asking questions right now. I'll come to my comments after I get through the questions. I'm asking for a clarification. What's the source of the money? Randy highlighted it was completely separate open funds monies, and I'm simply asking for a clarification. Is that 100% correct, or are there some monies coming from other revenue streams?
Mike, this is Steve Carr. There, obviously, with every project we do, every lawn that we mow, there's a cost of having our people do that. So there's always going to be, there's Randy's time and Mike's time, so we can go deep into those costs. obviously you and I and Diane and the management team have been talking about the finances of COVID, which I think is where you're going to end up going. The management team is going to come back in 2 weeks from now with our recommended budget amendments to deal with the COVID lack of or lost revenue. So we'll deal with that. Just from my standpoint, this is a project. Obviously, there's a lot of things that are good about it, and there's a timing that is weird about it because of COVID. But this, from my standpoint, is a project that I support because I think you're going to do this, and we're either going to go through this next year or later this year or at the next meeting if we don't do this now. And I don't think by stopping this, you're really going to save any money. Like, those employees are going to be employees of this township, or we're going to pay unemployment if they're not employees of this township. So that's my
we'll pay
view on
it. We're going to end up paying
I'd like to. Okay, I thank you. I'd like to continue with my question.
Yep.
So in general, let's step back out of this project. In general, you use for parks and playgrounds, you get grant money, but you do use other township revenue sources to fund parks and playgrounds.
Yes, to pay our employees to figure out what to do with those grant monies and to earn those grant monies. And then that
I mean for the actual physical installation. In other words, the purchase of the next park or the next playground.
I mean, I can use the previous playground, for example. I mean, the playground we just built in Grove Street Park, there was no grant that supported that. That's something that the previous board budgeted for in the 2019 budget, and Public Works did the entire installation of that. Everything down from the EMS controls to the installation of the playground, concrete work. This one's just a lot bit bigger. So there's obviously, we didn't want to tie them up for the entire summer down there. So it's really on a project by project basis, Mike.
Okay, so let me last question along this line, and then I got a couple more.
Fuck you.
So I think it's a timing issue. Someone said it earlier. So I think it's an issue. Should we proceed now, or prefer and proceed at a later point in time? You know, I don't think we should stop the project. If we proceed now and we spend the money now, are you going to be looking for more playground money next year to backfill you know the space that this held? Or if we defer this until next year and we don't spend this money until next year, are we going to save some money next year? And the reason I ask that is because we don't know the impact of the pandemic, and we don't know the timing. It's going to impact us this year and into next year. If you spend this money here, are you going to be asking for like an equivalent amount of money next year for the next park playground?
Not to this extent, no. I mean, if the board would like to continue renovating playgrounds, all the playgrounds in South Whitehall were built in the mid-90s, I believe. So a lot of them are losing their appeal, not being used as much. So we've been trying to do one playground a year for the past few years. If the board is not comfortable allocating capital funds or funds in future budgets, that's something we would talk about at the budget season. We wouldn't be coming back for more money to support this playground next year.
Randy, if we put this project off till next year,
come in here then.
There's a possibility that the project's going to cost more because we have to solicit bids that might be because of inflation or because of other factors, correct?
There's always that possibility. Yeah, anytime you go into a subsequent year, you could potentially spend more money on a project.
And there's also the possibility, there's also the likelihood, I would argue, that by putting it off another year, it's going to incur additional hours for staff because they're now going to have to revisit various issues that have already been resolved this year. So by putting it off for another year, we're basically going to burden staff with additional hours invested into this project that had already been invested, but they'll have to reinvest because of potential new issues, because of potential re-reviewing, going over documents and things that have already been approved of. Is it fair to say that a delay in this project will actually increase the amount of, incur additional staff hours by delaying it?
I would say from the management side, yeah, but I think the physical installation of the excavation, for the playground would likely remain the same, from the public works staff.
Okay, so I have completed my monetary questions. I think I have 3 more. They're simple, they're straightforward. I'm only looking for an answer from Randy, and I don't want to generate a long discussion.
Well, Mike, you keep asking questions, you're going to generate a long discussion, and Randy can answer them, but I'm going to jump in if I think I have something to say. So
that's good. So Randy, we put the bathroom on.
Sure.
How do you reconcile proceeding with this when we put the bathroom on hold to reduce our cost expenditure in 2020?
That's something we're going to have to revisit in, 2021 budget. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. And that was because that was straight general fund, tax revenue funded project. This is not.
Okay. Our finance team, so we have the benefit of this conversation. In order to reduce costs during the pandemic, we said that we would not initiate any new capital projects. How do you reconcile proceeding with this against that agreement we made?
And Mike, that's not an agreement. That the finance committee, first of all, is a working committee to help plan the long-term future of the township. We obviously have had more detailed discussions because of pandemic. So the only way to that all those any projects stop is by a positive vote of this board. Like, it's not a go-to meeting call we have on Thursdays. So that was not, we have obviously stopped some construction projects that we know we can save money and potentially have a longer look at when we would spend this money if the money comes in. But I don't want to be lumped into we agree to do something, because none of us staff or you or Diane on that committee can do anything but recommend to this board for them to do.
I'd like to interject here for a second, Mike, if I could. I think what we need to make sure we do is, this is not the committee. The finance committee is, like Steve had said, is a recommending body. When you say we, when we're talking about this final decisions made, that's from a full board, not from any recommending committees. That's a full board's decisions. And as far as your question or comment about this particular project being a new capital project or request, this is not new. We've talked about this for a very long time. It's been very carefully planned, and staff has been very sensitive to the concerns of finances the whole way through it, even prior to the pandemic. So I think that's very important to recognize that this is not a new project.
Okay, on your points, I appreciate the clarification. It's not a new project. It is a new expenditure, however. And on a previous point, I'm fully aware that the committee is a working committee and can only make recommendations. So thank you for clarifying that point. I have one last question. Randy, in your viewpoint, is this playground and the expenditure an essential or non-essential expenditure?
That's not a fair question for Randy, I don't believe. That's our decision, Mike. That's our decision, not Randy's decision. That's our decision. So I don't think it's fair to put Randy on the spot as a staff person. He was directed to start this project based on the discussions and the information that was received from the public. So to put him in the hot seat to make him make a decision that we as a board need to make is unfair. So I have to stop you on that one. I don't believe that's appropriate to ask that question.
Until we define what essential means, it's not even a realistic question, because you could say everything is essential or non-essential depending. It's all a subjective determination. Is picking up garbage essential? Well, if we're in a pandemic, maybe not. Is doing a park essential? Maybe. Is paying the commissioner's salaries or our stipend essential or non-essential? Is providing any service that the township provides essential or non-essential? Unless we can all agree upon what is essential and non-essential, no one on this call should be beholden to answering a question that has no definition.
Okay, thank you, Matt. We'll come back to that point that you just made. Thank you.
All right. I would like Commissioner Walker, are your questions answered? Are you good?
I'm good.
Thank you. Commissioner Kelly, did you have something you needed to add?
I just wanted to clarify, Steve Carr, you made a statement earlier. I'm having a hard time hearing. You stated the management team was going to come back in 2 weeks, and I didn't hear the rest. It had something to do with the budget.
Yeah, I was going to wait until discussion items, but we're obviously management team has been working diligently to figure out where we can save or potentially save to potentially offset any lost revenues. So we're going to come back in 2 weeks from now with a comprehensive request for a budget amendment to set us up for the best possible outcome of an unknown COVID financial future.
So at this point, do we have a projection for revenue? For the rest of the year, where we are?
Do we have we have best guesses, which is, as you guys know, changes every day depending on COVID. So we're going to take the best shot we have at it, and we'll keep coming back and adjusting as we go, which is what I've said from day one of this pandemic is we'll keep adjusting. Obviously, we're always watching expenses in a good year or a great year, but we're doing that on a day-to-day basis now. So we'll come back in 2 weeks with a budget amendment, which then gets voted on by the board, and that will adjust the budget and within those guidelines. And then if we need to continue to change that, or it turns around and there's more things we potentially could do, then we'll look at it and come to the board at that point in time.
So Steve, thank you for providing that information. Who's talking? Diane?
Diane Kelly, yes. I just had a follow-up, Steve. Thank you for the information, and I look forward to getting that information. I think it's critical for us as a board, as the funding approval board, to know where we are financially. And as we look at a project of this magnitude, and there is some taxpayer funds being used, it makes sense to me that we would pause this until we know our financial health before we make decisions on things that are not essential to the basic township government, providing services for our township community.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that is what's in front of the board right now is to advertise so that we can get bids on a piece of this project. So it would be beneficial to us be able to advertise those and know what those numbers are that come in, so we can continue the planning process, or else it's going to stop and it's just going to delay that planning process at a place where we're not even saying, yes, here's the project and we're going for requesting that to go forward. We're at a place where we need to go get this information, and if we don't do that, we can't get the information we're going to need to make those decisions.
We put this out for bid and we get a contractor that gives us a reasonable bid, and we have the project on hold, so his bid is good for 60 days, and we decide not to move forward till the fall based on our financial projections. Then we've got a contractor on the hook as well. So we're putting things in motion that we don't know the end to, again, in a place where we don't have an estimate even from the management team of where we are financially as a board. That's something that I think we need to consider.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, the townships move a little bit slower sometimes on some things, and obviously, when you're doing a project of this large a scope, it's not going to be limited to like 60-day bid. They're going to give us a lot more time than that. So I still believe that getting that information so that we can, I mean, they may come in lower and it drops the price on it. So I don't know. That's up to the board to vote on.
In an effort to keep this moving, because we've talked about this now for almost 45 minutes, I feel like. Can we get some questions or comments if there's any from the public? That I saw a few chats come in.
I just have one more thing, Commissioner Morgan. I just have one more quick thing for Steve. Thank you for informing us that you have the summary, which we asked for last week. So look forward to seeing it and going over it with you tomorrow at our next finance meeting.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the public on this particular topic? I saw a few chats come in. It's an opportunity now to speak to the board if you have a comment.
Yeah, this is Dave Burke. I wrote the comment there. Can you restate again how much money it is and the buckets it comes from? Basically, through the course of conversation, I understand it's $610,000, $250,000 from the grant, $10,000 from sponsorships, and the other $350,000 is
Open Space Fund.
Okay, so that's
Parks and Rec.
So that's money that exists in a budget for open space. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. It actually it's cash that's in hand from previous development that we've received open space funds for.
Okay, so it's cash on hand in open space budget, but it could be deferred to other things if required.
Yeah, but all related to specific items. Like it can't go to general fund or water fund or anything like that. It has to be specific to open space, parks, that type of stuff.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? You're welcome. Are there any other questions or comments from the public? All right. That being said, we do have the opportunity at this point for a motion to move forward to advertise for the concrete work to be completed for the covered bridge park. Do I hear said motion? We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Mobilio. I'll make a second on that motion, a second from Commissioner Morgan. Could I have a roll call vote, please, Renee? Commissioner Walk.
No.
Commissioner Mobilio.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly.
No.
Commissioner Sutton.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Steve and Randy and everybody for the information provided behind that.
Randy, don't be deterred. You keep up the good fight.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good job. All right. Next, for consideration this evening, we have a street moratorium exemption request for 1390 Springhouse Road. Randy, would you like to present on this one? Did I lose you, Randy?
Sorry, I was still on mute there. I apologize. So
that's okay.
This is a street moratorium exemption request. You've seen similar requests come in across your desk here the past few meetings. This is for a property at 1390 Springhouse Road. The contractor is in attendance tonight, so I'll turn it over to him if you'd like to jump in here. Joe, are you still there?
I'm still here, yes.
Okay. So Joe, if you just want to explain the project you're working on and why you're looking for this exemption.
Okay. Well, the end of last year, 2019, the customer on Springhouse Road approached my business about converting from oil to natural gas, as they were having many problems with their system. So I visited with the customer early January, and they wanted to go ahead with the project. So the first step of the project, whenever converting to gas, is to contact UGI, and utility at UGI had approved or told me the fact that there is gas available. So that's the first step you have to do, is make sure gas is on the street. So they gave me the intersections of where the gas is, and they said, yes, we can do this project, which they then began to work up a contract for my customer. Got a verbal agreement from the customer to proceed with the work. So my next step is to go to South Whitehall Township with my permit request, which they approved on January 20th of 2020, which clearly indicated that I was going to be converting to natural gas with UGI. The customer signed the UGI agreement to proceed with the work on January 31st. And I also received my signed agreement with a deposit for the work on January 31st of 2020. The customer had many issues going on with the system. So being the fact that I was cleared from UGI had actually come and marked the flag where we were going to be locating the meter. I had received a signed agreement, sent it off to UGI that they had given me, and I had the permit approvals from South Whitehall. So I began to do all of this work. And this is an 8,000 square foot house. This was a very expensive job. On February 18th, UGI had contacted me back with the exact meter size and pressure input they would like, because they had planned on coming that week. February 24th, right when I was just about wrapping up with this job, I was then denied the natural gas because of the moratorium. So this timeline is, I'm not trying to just put blame anywhere else, but I'm just trying to show the sequence of events that I did everything that I could as a contractor, and everything that I'm asked to do as a contractor. So that kind of put a damper on things. And as you can guess, the customer was not happy with me. So my reputation means a lot to me, and we've been in business for over 100 years, right down the road. So that's what was most important to me. So I set temporary propane tanks, as we are a propane customer, and have incurred all of those charges. There are also $3,300 worth in rebates from UGI that I cannot collect, which I incurred those charges as well from my company, absorbed those charges for the customer, which they are about to expire, those rebates, because you only have a certain amount of days from installations to do that. So we were told we're not allowed to dig until June of next year. So again, the customer is not very happy. So I do have the UGI printout. The second part of this, after laying out the timeline, is basically, I'm assuming my explanation of the minimal amount of work that would actually be necessary to complete this job. The location on Springhouse Road, the Springhouse Road itself is 50 feet across. And according to the diagram from UGI, the access to gas for this home is 5 feet off of their curb. So I'm not sure if anybody on the board is familiar with, I know you guys state the moratoriums, but the technology that they have now, the minimum amount of work that's actually needed, they basically tunnel under the ground. So my assumption would be, based on the last job that UGI did for me a few weeks ago, we'd probably be looking at about a 12-inch access in the road, 5 feet off the curb, and probably 2 cones around it, and probably less than an hour, this entire thing would be completed. So like I said, the two things that I basically want to lay out was my timeline, showing that somewhere across in the middle of all that, the information wasn't given or received. I feel like that should have been basically the first thing that was noted, because I don't have access to that sort of thing, which would be great if I did, I and my other contractors don't run into this problem again. So the timeline was my first thing to go over, and then again, the minimum amount of work, which I feel is more important, because at this point, that's really the most important thing, is to get approval to just get this done. the customer is paying more, obviously, for using propane as opposed to the natural gas, which is less expensive. So, I mean, they're at the point where they don't really care what happened in between. I'm the one that sold them the job, so they're looking to me to make this right. And I'll probably be subject to having to answer to them in some sort of other ways, which I don't really want to incur any more charges if I can't get this done.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, Herb, do you have anything you want to touch on here in regards to the road restoration?
Yeah, the road has one more year left on the moratorium, like he said. Just to be clear though, Joe, the gas line is 8 feet off the curb, so your cut would come out almost 11 feet into the road. So what we propose back to you with Jim Balliet is that we would be okay, as long as the commissioners grant access to it, that you would have to restore all from the 11-foot mark out all the way back to the curb line.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's how they actually open the access anymore. I believe they just do a diameter opening.
Yes.
At least based on the last job I was at, I don't think they actually trench to the curb. So I don't think that the opening's as big as that.
I understand what you're saying, Joe, but what they want to do is put a 5x3 cut in the street, leave a 2-foot section down the curb line where all the water runs. So now we have a seam at the curb line and a seam 2 feet into the road. What we told them we would like to see is for them to take that cut all the way to the curb line and restore it with the 5 inches of binder and the 1.5 inches of topping.
And you're referring to what UGI would be taking care of?
Whoever's going to restore the cut, that's what we propose back to them.
Right. So are we still awaiting approval to do that?
We have not got an answer whether they say yes or no, that they would take it all the way to the curb. Now, if you say you'll make sure it's done, if that's your cost, then it would be your cost to make sure it goes all the way back to the curb.
Yeah, I mean, I can work it out with them because, I mean, realistically, I feel like this was something that they should have picked up on their end before having signed agreements. So, I mean, I can probably work it out with them that they would cover it. I just want to get approval to do it. And if they didn't cover it, you know, I don't want to say that I would because then I don't know if they're, you know, who's on this line. But, you know, it's not really my responsibility. But that would be up to me to work out with them. But again, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. But I did everything that I needed to do as a contractor and was given approval, you know, from them from the very beginning and also a signed agreement, you know. So,
yeah,
I mean,
I understand where you're coming from. But I'm also going to take a stance that I have to protect the road in South Whitehall. That's my job. So I'm not.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I don't want that 2-foot piece left in there.
And does anybody have an estimate for this work to be done?
I mean, I think probably conversation to be figured out before we're asked to vote on a moratorium on this issue.
Yeah, because I mean, I was given, you know, like a $1,000 charge to basically proceed from this point, you know, and I would be willing to incur costs, you know, but I would like to talk to them first because again, I have everything on my timeline. I have a paper trail, you know, as far as the way that everything worked up to this point. So.
Well, might I suggest that we table this until maybe you can gather a little bit more information and come back to the board on this one? Or do you have a time restraint?
Well, I do. Yeah, I mean, I have, like I said, $3,300 in rebates that are about to expire. You know, and and the customer is not happy because they've got tanks sitting out in their front yard, so I mean, I have all the information that I needed.
We can vote on the moratorium request, and then you can decide whether it makes sense for you and the customer financially to move forward. It'd probably make more sense to just do that. We're not making any promises as to what it's going to cost you or cost the customer on this vote tonight.
Yeah, and that's fine. I would rather play it that way, and I can get an estimate tomorrow and have it all figured out by then, and then we're good to go.
But the vote would have to be with you taking care of all the repairs.
And the repairs will be. I can guarantee you the repairs will be taken care of. If they're not going to take care of them, then I would take care of the charges.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I can give you an estimate, Joe. You're looking at about 2 ton of 25 millimeter and about a ton of top.
Don't do that now on the record. You got to investigate. You guys do that outside, off the record. We can vote on the moratorium, but I don't think it's appropriate for us to give, because God forbid the estimate's wrong, the invoice is wrong, whatever. But I think tonight's purpose is just to, are we going to grant the exemption or not? And if we grant it, you guys go figure out what's going to cost, and then that's that. Is that fair to say, everyone? Everyone, Steve, George, whatever?
That sounds good to me.
Is there any questions from the board on this particular moratorium exemption request?
I just have a comment.
Sure thing.
Obviously, Herb had some concerns with, Township Road and curbing, so I don't know if we need to change the wording that the repairs and corrections to the road are done to the satisfaction of the township, if we're not to leave it open-ended.
Has to be inspected, yeah.
I think that's part of the. I think that's part of the process. Attorney Zader, isn't that already part of the process, or?
Yeah, that'll have to be inspected. The job is going to have to be inspected and approved before and after.
Hey, Joe, you're on mute.
I am?
Attorney?
No,
it's Zader.
No, I'm not.
Sorry. Oh, I agree with Commissioner Setton's comment a moment ago, but my question for Herb is the standard that you just outlined with the amount of binder course, the amount of top coat, the size that has to be taken care of. Is that something spelled out in township ordinance or other writing that establishes the requirement, or is that subjective?
It's basically left up to our discretion how we would want it restored.
Okay.
At the end of the day, the only thing that, if we grant this exemption, the only thing we're doing tonight is saying you can move forward with the work subject to every other ordinance, rule, regulation that the township has and the requirements of public works and whoever else, just so you're aware.
I would agree.
Yeah,
with
this
that.
is Joe. I mean, that sounds good to me. Obviously, whatever I end up doing, it's going to be up to code and approved by the township.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the public on this particular motion? All right. That being said, do I hear? I'm sorry.
I had a question. Lee Salt, 3731 Manchester Road.
Hi, Lee.
Hi, Christina. How are you? Question for the contractor. I live right down the street, 3 doors down from the northwest corner where the feed is across the street. How long is this road work going to take to go from the northwest corner to the southwest corner, or northeast corner to the southwest corner of Manchester and Springhouse?
How long is the work for the road repair going to take, or are you talking about actually UGI's end of the work?
From the day you open it up to the day you close it up and it's done.
Well, we would organize it so that it's all done at the same time. So UGI would probably be in and out of there in about 20 minutes or off the street, and then everything would begin to be filled and repaired simultaneously.
Okay, so you're talking like 2 days as compared to 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking an hour.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it's very simple.
Lee, they're gonna put an oil derrick in your front yard,
Okay.
so you know.
What's that?
That's the end goal here is an oil derrick in Lee's front yard.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, so I
Got it.
apologize.
So are there any other comments or questions from the public? All right. That being said, do I hear a motion to move forward with the moratorium exemption request for 1390 Springhouse Road?
So moved.
We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I'll make it. All right. We have a second. I think that was Commissioner Mobilio. Can I have a roll call vote, please,
Yes,
Renee?
ma'am.
Commissioner Walk,
Aye.
Commissioner Mobilio,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Seton,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Joe, for that presentation. Good luck.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a great night.
You too. All right. Moving on on our agenda, we have. I'm getting a lot of back feed, Steve. All right. We have no correspondence and information items. Under our direction and discussion items, we do have one presentation from our very own Mr. Kinney on land development review process. Mr. Kinney.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. And we're going to try some, well, it looks like Steve's going to handle that for me. So no, I do have control of your desktop. Okay. So thank you, Commissioners. What I wanted to do tonight was, particularly for the new Commissioners, it's a great refresher for everybody, but kind of talk a little bit about our current land development process. And, you know, this is really not a unique process. You know, the MPC obviously drives a lot of what we do from the land development side. And a lot of municipalities are really doing kind of the same things with subtle nuances depending on what kind of advisory boards they have and you know, where they leave the control for final decision making and so forth. So Steve, do I have this? I want to see if Steve, you still have control, is it?
Yeah, you should have some control if you move. Yep, you got it. If the mouse is a little slow, you can arrow now if you want.
Okay, I got you. All right.
If we have any other issues, I'll just grab it and bring up your other stuff. Just let me know.
Okay, so yeah, so it's just a little slow. So let me get back to this last slide here. Again. Why is it not?
I got you, George. How about that?
Yes, give me right there. So this is, we put this, actually, Greg Adams in our office put this chart together a long time ago. So this is a relatively old schematic of how the land development process works. You know, obviously, I'm not going to go through this. I'm going to try and simplify what you see here in the next few slides. But in essence, you can begin to see how complicated and highly technical this process can be. It's, as I mentioned, driven, you know, in good part by the municipal planning code on all kinds of aspects, and we'll get into some of the timing aspects that Joe already kind of hit on earlier in the conversation. And like I said, I'm going to try and kind of break this down into something that is a little bit easier to understand. So I'm going to try next slide, see if I can't get it. Let's see if it goes here. This worked earlier in the day, I promise you. We had a, yeah. Steve, if you can move me to the next slide, that'd be great. There you go. So, you know, obviously any land development plan starts with an idea or concept. In South Whitehall Township, those submissions can really come in three forms. One is optional, the first one being a sketch plan. So some developers, particularly for larger projects, will submit a sketch plan. And the idea is to kind of get some preliminary feedback on the project before they put too much pen to paper and get into a lot of engineering detail. Probably the majority of our projects though really come in either a preliminary plan form or in a combination preliminary and final plan form. So a good example of a combination preliminary final plan form was the John Jandal subdivision. It was a relatively routine single lot subdivision. They got it all done in one shot because it wasn't as complicated a project as most of the projects are. A lot of our projects though come in preliminary plan first, and then they come final plan second. A good example of that, I think, is probably the King George Inn. So you've looked at their preliminary plan, now they're coming back through with the final plan. What this doesn't talk about necessarily is we also obviously get applications for the zoning hearing board consideration for variances, conditional use, particularly dimensional relief for a land development or subdivision. So those are also kind of included as submissions, but they're not necessarily, they're land development related, not necessarily the land development themselves. And then obviously once that plan comes in the board or comes in the door, that's when we ask initially for escrow. So basically a developer and escrow is defined, the type of escrow and the amount of escrow is defined within our subdivision and land development ordinance and in our fee schedule. So that escrow then will run with the project to cover any costs incurred for the project from a third-party review standpoint. So as third-party reviews happen on these land development plans, the costs incurred by those third parties is then given back to, is actually paid out of pocket through the escrow by the developer. Next one, Steve, please. So the MPC, and Joe kind of hit on this for the zoning hearing board. So the MPC does prescribe time frames and commitments for which the municipality has to review and approve a plat. In the case of a land development subdivision, that time frame is 90 days. You know, anecdotally, we know that very few projects get through in 90 days. So they can certainly, the MPC certainly allows that a project can be extended at the request of the applicant. And typically those extensions benefit both parties, as you guys know, because the applicant is working on a series of plan notes and feedback they're getting from advisory agencies and from commissions and boards and so forth. So a lot of times when they do ask for an extension, it's because they need to work through all of those issues that have been outlined for them. And I'll give them a little more detail as to how that all comes together in the next couple of slides. Next, Steve, thank you. So once that plan's in the door, what do we do with it? So that plan comes in the CD, it comes in the front door, and typically we ask for a series of sets of plans, I think 10 typically for a land development plan, and you can start to see why. So this breakdown that you see here is all the agencies that they don't always all have input into a project, but they certainly may have input into a project. And if you start with the left-hand side, the first thing is our municipal consultants. So we have Joe Zader's office that's going to be looking at a plan from the legal perspective and consistency with the MPC and all of those other kinds of legal issues. We certainly have our engineering group. So we have, as you know, the Pitcock company is our third-party engineer. They'll review the plan for engineering issues and really a lot of the other technical issues that a plan might bring. We have Spot Stevens and McCoy as our third-party utility provider. So as water and sewer issues are discussed, they have a lot of input into that planning process. We have a geotechnical consultant that's looking at soil structure and bearing weights and things like that. So that's handled through Hanover with our alternate being CMT. Sewer issues may pop up, particularly on the on-site sewer side. If it's a smaller subdivision that's not using centralized water and sewer services, Keystone Consulting is often one of the groups that would weigh in on what's happening there. From a design perspective, as you know, on larger projects, we typically also send a plan set to Committa, and they will look at it from a design perspective, particularly where an overlay might be involved. Somebody's put something on this. Am I good? There we go. So another consultant is our lighting consultant. So, every site is evaluated for the lighting aspect, and we do have provisions that talk about where lights have to be directed so that there's no spillover on the neighboring properties. And then certainly the last aspect of it, once you get into the permitting part of it, is our inspection consultants, which we talked a little bit about today. We have P Codes and Barry Isett and Associates. Now that's just what kind of happens internally. We've also got to push these plans out to our regional partners. So the Lehigh Valley or the Lehigh County Conservation District is often looking at plans for stormwater management and stormwater controls in the construction process. The Lehigh Valley Planning Commission is involved, and what they'll typically look at is the plan's consistency with the regional comprehensive plan, their plan basically. We have the Lehigh County Authority for Water and Sewer Issues. LANTA is routinely involved for transit and mobility issues, and particularly larger projects that generate a lot of workers or people that really need to get from one spot to another. We have PP&L for electrical issues. Parkland School District is involved in all of that. We require a plan set be delivered to them for all projects as well. And then certainly surrounding municipalities, particularly for projects that border the edges of our community into other communities, most notably Upper Township and Allentown, and certainly North Whitehall to a certain extent. We have internal departments that will look at those plans. Our zoning officer resides in the community development department. That's Laura Harrier. She looks at it for consistency with the zoning ordinance. We have our planning department. Obviously, that's myself and Greg and Dave Manhart to a certain extent, and we're looking at a project for consistency with the SALDO and just general planning principles, in particular. The project then also goes to Public Works for any input that they might have. There are state agencies that are sometimes involved, depending on the nature of the project. As you know, if the project borders a state road, PennDOT is always involved, typically through what's called an HOP, or Highway Occupancy Permit process. But at many times also the PA Department of Environmental Protection, the Emergency Management Agency, and the Department of Community and Economic Development are also included on some reviews, depending on the nature and extent of that project. And then finally, federal agencies are sometimes actually included in the review of these, including the Federal Emergency Management Agency with respect to floodplain and flood administration issues, the Environmental Protection Agency, and of course the Federal Highway Administration. So you start to see who gets a crack at these plans when they come in, and then you can start to wonder why you're not going to get really through that process in 90 days. Each of these agencies will generate a comment report. And sometimes they're short, they're one page with a couple of bullets. Sometimes, particularly, I don't want to call Tony out, but sometimes in the case of like Pitcock or our geotech, they can be very extensive, be 10 to 12 to 13 or 14 pages long. So it's basically, our role in CD at that point to kind of assemble all those comments and bring them forward for board consideration. Steve, next slide.
Tony will work for the president. He's gonna have to cut things down to like a page, half a page.
That would be great. So also part of this, as you all very well know, you have 3 advisory boards that help you with this. When plans come in, a set is automatically transmitted to the Parks and Recreation Board. And of course, their role is primarily to look at the open space provisions that either a developer is recommending or that the township would like to see. And they will make recommendations back, again, a written recommendation back to us to incorporate it into our review. The second recommendation advisory committee you have is the Landscape and Shade Tree Commission. They do a lot of work on the front end to make sure the landscaping is appropriate. They also do a lot of work on the back end to make sure everything's put into place and is where it's supposed to be per plan spec. And then, of course, you have the Public Safety Committee, and their role is primarily to look at a project from a safety perspective. Moving emergency vehicles in and out of a subdivision as expeditiously as possible. Steve. And I want to throw this in really quick too. So the zoning hearing board is actually a critical component to all this as well. It's not really directly tied into what we do, and what comes out of that zoning hearing board in the form of their decisions isn't necessarily tied back to a land development in the form of a recommendation. But a lot of times when a project comes in the door, it may not, and typically they don't, meet zoning in one aspect or another, whether they've got lots that are too small, whether they've got, you know, certain interior roads that don't meet certain zoning requirements, whatever the case might be. Typically what will happen is we'll basically shut down the land development review aspect of the project until that's worked out, because a lot of times the decision that the zoning hearing board makes will affect dramatically the design and layout of the subdivision. So it really benefits the developer to kind of get through that process first, so that they know kind of, you know, where they stand with respect to their ultimate design and layout. Now, a lot of times we might catch a need to go to the zoning hearing board at the preliminary plan stage, and then the developer will obviously grant us a waiver or time extension until they work through that process. But that zoning hearing board is a quasi-judicial review, and, you know, as it states in the slide there, of requests pertaining to use and/or dimensional relief. So they're critical to the land development process, but not necessarily a part of the recommendation that gets to the BOC. They really kind of, that organization really kind of stands on its own. Next, Steve. So all of those reports and commissions that, all those reports we get from these particular agencies come back in various forms. So it's our role at CD to kind of start to assemble a review and then make some sense out of what we're seeing. You know, a lot of that review then, you know, Zeta's office is continuing to help us with that review. We're constantly using staff to, you know, different departments to make sure that what we're doing makes sense and what we're doing is, you know, a sound recommendation based on the codes that are in place in South Whitehall, particularly the subdivision land development ordinance. Steve, if you could pull up, at this point, I wanted to show you kind of just very briefly the first 2 pages of what a typical packet looks like. It's that, that's it. Thank you, Steve. So this gives you an idea. So we could talk about this one because we're coming back to you, but this was, so this is Hotel Hamilton. This is about a 55-page staff report. So it's pretty much, you know, what goes to the planning commission. You just go to the second page, Steve, scroll down just the next page. There's all your comments that are coming back from your advisory agencies, and they're incorporated in this 50-page memo down below. I won't run you through that. But you start to see how that's all compiled. So you got the township engineer letter dated February 14, the geotech letter dated, so the dates are there, the comments are in there, and those are all for the developer to see prior to his presentation to the planning commission for recommendation. And of course, as part of this, there is a recommendation from staff. And of course, a part of this is where that waiver aspect comes into play too, because in that township engineering review letter, part of what they review is any waivers or deferrals that the developer may be requesting as part of the application. And they will evaluate those from an engineering standpoint and make a recommendation as to whether or not they make sense or don't make sense. So Steve, if you could go out of that one and into that last that report, that other attachment that yeah, right there. So if you just want to slide up a little bit, go up a little bit towards the top, Steve. I just want to show you this. This is keep going, top, right there, right there. Whoop, whoop, that one. So this just gives you an idea. This is 2019. So this just gives you an idea of, it's not a complete breakdown. There's an appendix that goes along with this for a complete monthly breakdown of 2019 activity. This gives you an idea of how projects kind of went through the process in 2019. So for instance, Blue Barn Estates, there was one waiver that was recommended. There were 4 deferrals that were recommended. It was a 4-lot subdivision. So if you look at the totals, the number of lots in 2019 that were developed were 80, but 69 of those were obviously Blue Barn Meadows 3, which was a project that was really preliminarily approved some time ago, and this was just the final phase. If you look at the commercial aspect, we did about 107,736 square feet of new commercial, and if you look at the industrial aspect, you know, that's a bigger nut. That's over 1 million square feet when you look at the 2 approved projects, which were Chapman's Road and Crackersport Road, DC. Steve, if you could just scroll down to the Parks and Rec chart, I just want to show that too, really quickly. Should be the last, yep, right there. And this is what Parks and Rec did in 2019. So this just gives you an idea of the projects that they looked at. 4741 Chapman's Road, Harold Avenue, Roosevelt Flats, and then their recommendation in the form of open space and so forth. And you start to see at the bottom the amount that the township brought in 2019 for fees and lieu. So those are just examples of land developments. I just want to show you that because that's 2019 activity for land developments that actually went through these processes that we're talking about. Good, Steve. Back to the presentation, and I can wrap this up pretty quick and take questions here. So next slide. So once those reports are through and they're presented to the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission then makes a recommendation to the board, obviously. So you basically receive the same packet from our planning staff. Now, what I try to do is break that down into a one-page memo, which is obviously impossible. So you get from me an overview of the project with a little bit of history. But what you get from Greg when he puts the BOC package together is basically that same package that the PC that goes to the PC, only with the decision of the PC, so that you know what they're recommending. Next slide, Steve. And then yep, thank you. And so at the end of the process, the MPC does prescribe what needs to be done. So if the final decision from the BOC needs to be in writing, and obviously staff puts that out on your behalf, and it needs to be communicated to the applicant personally or mailed to them not later than 15 days following the decision. When not approved, the decision shall specify the defects found in the application and describe the requirements which have not been met, and shall in each case cite the provisions of the statute or ordinance relied on. And then obviously you've heard this before, number 3, failure to render a decision and communicate it to the applicant within the time frame and manner required by the MPC shall be deemed an approval unless the applicant is agreed to write in writing to an extension. We've obviously talked about that. Next slide, Steve. And so, once a project's approved, it's certainly not over because, we try to, the Planning Commission does their best to get the Board of Commissioners as clean a plan as possible, but that obviously doesn't always work out with all the conditions that are tied to these approvals and to these requests. So the applicant has that time after you approve an application to start to work on satisfying your final conditions. And, once they do that, then they've always got a plan that's in position to be recorded at the county courthouse. Steve, I think I got one more, and I think that might be it. Yes. So, and then once that record plan is recorded, that's when the applicant then is permitted to come in and pull a building permit and actually start construction. So that's generally how it works in a very simplified manner. And certainly those advisory committees and certainly those boards are, working for the BOC in all instances and trying to, obviously trying to present you with the best possible product they can present you that's consistent with our codes and our plans, programs, and policies. And that's all I got.
George, that was fantastic.
Good job.
Thank you for that land development 101 crash course. I think it's important. I appreciate you bringing that back to the board to go through the process and the value and the importance of each one of the steps and the advisory boards that go into it. So thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, can I just add something real quick to note that I love the presentations of like the process, how the sausage is made. I think I know there's not a ton of people on the line right now, but making it available and letting people know that all the work that goes into the process, I think is a tremendous benefit to the township and the residents. And I would encourage you guys to, it doesn't have to be a lengthy presentation like you did to George, which I think was great, but just a little bit of insight for everyone, I think is awesome.
Well, we can certainly post this online if you'd like us to. And, we love to take these kinds of things out to the public where we can in like a town hall setting, but obviously we're not doing much of that right now. But certainly would like to pick some of those things up for you. when we're allowed to get out safely again.
I think posting it's a great idea, George. That's a fantastic presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
George, I had a couple questions for you. The activity breakdown that you showed, that's wonderful. I have access before.
I'm losing you a little bit, Diane.
Are you there now?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay. The activity breakdown, the chart that you showed was really great. I personally have never seen that. And is that something that you can present to the board maybe quarterly or twice a year so that, you know, we're aware of where we are?
Diane, you're gonna love that. That's actually a sneak peek of your annual report.
Ah, very nice.
That you're gonna get. That's actually the draft planning commission annual report, which is our first crack at that, and we'll obviously be presenting that to you guys next in 2 weeks for delivery to the BOC. So if we want to talk about doing it more often, certainly we can do that. Yeah.
I think it could be helpful just for the board to be aware of where we are. Those are very interesting numbers to know. And then my second question is when plans are submitted, whether it's sketch or I guess more for the preliminary plans, is that something that's made available to the public at that point?
They are public documents once they come in the door. So yes, typically we would ask somebody if they're wanting to look at them for a right to know request. That's kind of the way we do it now, but they are definitely publicly available.
Okay. And one topic we didn't touch on, and I don't know if Commissioner Morgan, I know you had mentioned that Attorney Zader was going to discuss the Board of Commission's role in the determination of open space versus fees in lieu of.
So,
well,
I mean, I actually have a thought on that if it's helpful. But I'll hold that unless.
Go ahead. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so I mean, basically the board has complete control over the open space decisions now. So almost everything in the SALDO says it is the board's decision on whether or not. Well, let me back up. The SALDO is really looking for one thing first. What it's looking for as the first driver is dedicated open space to the township that is considered to be suitable. Suitable is defined in the SALDO with 9 conditions. So there are 9 conditions that talk about suitable land. So what the SALDO is saying is, first, we want a developer to dedicate land to the township that is suitable, which means it meets those 9 conditions. Typically, the land is such that it's just not going to allow you to meet those conditions. So it gives them, the SALDO then gives the developer the option of asking for fee in lieu or dedicating land to another entity, such as Parkland High School or a park or, whatever the case might be. And all of those decisions have to be made by the Board of Commissioners. Now, what the SALDO does is it drives that recommendation aspect through the Parks and Recs Board for recommendations back to the BOC. And I think what's been happening is, you're not seeing that till the end. And maybe what we can do, at least think about, is amending the SALDO, tweaking the SALDO, I would say, to make sure that once that Parks and Recs recommendation is done, that it somehow gets to you right after that. Instead of it coming back to us to be incorporated into a packet for a decision, 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road, you would see it basically right away, almost at the same time that Public Safety would do their reviews, Landscape and Shade Tree Commission would do theirs, and Parks and Rec would do theirs. So that's, I don't know how you all feel about that, but that would be a simple fix that would get you dialed into that decision sooner rather than later.
If we added to that.
I'm sorry, just as a follow-up, that would be in keeping with, as you said, the numerous times in our SALDO that it mentions that the Board of Commissioners is the deciding factor in that. So, I mean, I certainly would like to discuss tonight. The possibility of seeing it after Parks and Rec does. We can hear their recommendation, and this board would have a chance to look at that as well.
I just have one comment to that. I mean, I think from a face value, it sounds reasonable. My concern is we have a process in place, and I'm not against at all modifying the process if it makes sense. But there's a process in place that works. I mean, I'm not sure what the impetus is for this, Diane. I know you've been pushing for this for a couple of meetings now, and I'm not really sure what's driving it, like what the issue is or concern or why it is, or if there's something wrong, but we haven't had any issues. But my concern would be, you know, if we see it, which it sounds great at face value, but what I don't want to see happen is for an unnecessary stumbling block be put in front of anybody who has a plan because of somebody's personal opinions on the open space part of it. I don't know what's driving all this. I'm just questioning that. That's the part that concerns me, because the process works. I don't know what's not working and why you want to see this so desperately.
Well, first of all, it's not desperate, Tori. I was on the Planning Commission when we went through the saldo updates, the service packs, and one of the paragraphs did talk about any project more than 50 dwellings needed to come before the Board of Commissioners. I'm just asking us to be consistent with our saldo. We made updates to those amendments, and they were brought to my attention as well as the attention of the full Planning Commission.
Yeah, this is Mike Walk. Diane said it the first time. She said it again. We have a saldo. We should follow the saldo. The process is out of compliance. I don't see the problem with complying with the saldo, and let the BOC have an opportunity to have an input and make a decision on this earlier in the process, which is not happening right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the process is out of compliance. What I would say is your bite at the apple is coming later rather than sooner. And I think what Diane is saying is I don't want to have the impression here that there's something wrong with the saldo. We're not doing something correctly. That's not the case at all. The way it's been done is the project, all the comments get assembled, as I mentioned in that presentation. They get assembled, they get ferreted through the Planning Commission for a recommendation to you. You still see it, you just see it at the end. This could, if you wanted to do it this way, if you wanted to see that recommendation sooner, you would just see it sooner. I don't know if it doesn't really disrupt the process, or the only way it changes the process is you're just kind of seeing it before the end. You've normally seen it at the end. But I don't want there to be an impression out there that we're not following the process or the saldo, because that's not the case.
Yeah.
Question.
Okay.
Well, I think it was the timing
for that.
I think the issue is the timing of that.
I don't know the exact,
right.
I don't know the exact language of the saldo as I sit here today, but maybe someone can interpret it for me. And my question is, does the saldo say at which point the Board of Commissioners has the right or opportunity to make a decision?
No, that's the issue. I think that's the issue that you're talking about. Is it talks about who's responsible for ultimately approving it, being the Board of Commissioners, but it doesn't really say when you do that. So that would be the distinction. I think if you wanted to see it sooner, there would be an opportunity to maybe work with Joe's office to construct some language that talks about when that recommendation comes to you. And it's obviously completely up to you guys, but it's just.
You don't have to.
I think
if it doesn't say in
generally,
the saldo already how we or when we see it, we wouldn't necessarily have to change the saldo.
I agree with that.
You would. I mean, it could be a policy direction, I suppose, if you didn't want to change the saldo.
As long as we're not changing the process. We're not necessarily changing the process.
No, you're not changing the process. You're just moving a step up a little bit.
do we have any idea why? I mean, it seems to me, and I'm just shooting from the hip here, is that the idea is that the reason why we have issues going to public safety and issues going to other departments, well, I don't want to say lesser departments, because I don't want to make it sound like they're not important, but they're lower level decision makers or recommenders, because there's so many nuts and bolts to go through that they look at all the nuts and bolts, make a recommendation, and then we as the board have an opportunity to look at the recommendation and the data supporting it, because the reality is we don't have the time or resources to be at that grand level looking at every single piece of information that comes up. Is that, and I'm not suggesting that that is what it is, but it seems to me that would be the impetus for the way it's set up right now. But is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's right on, Matt. The other part of it is, it's getting sent to people that have specific expertise in a certain field. So like Snyder Hoffman is our lighting consultant. That's what they do. Their organization reviews lighting plans. They understand cutoff fixtures and spillover. Geotech, same way. They understand subsurface types of things. So, and Pitcock, they get the engineering aspect. So there are unique talents that these third-party reviewers have that they bring to the table in a way that you wouldn't get if, just say, CD was reviewing everything. So I think you're absolutely right. And these are complex. These things are complex. When you start looking at the MPD and the burden that is placed on a developer to bring a clean plan and to see if the only plan I think that I've been here for that's gone through within the 90-day period is that John Jandal subdivision, which was a single lot subdivision with an existing home on it. Other than that, the permitting processes, NPDES processes, and all these things just take massive amounts of time and expertise to work through, as you guys know.
Let me maybe give an example.
I'm sorry, I wanted to just comment before I lose track with Commissioner Mobilio. I think the difference with this particular thing is when it ends up at the Board of Commissioners, if we choose at that point as a board to say, you know what, we don't want the fees, we'd rather have the land dedicated, the developer then has to go back and rework their plan. And I know we reviewed this at the last meeting, that the engineering costs for the developer would just be, it would never be anything that we would do because it would just be too far along. And if our comments are in at that point, they're futile. So in order for us to effectively do what our saldo says, which is that the Board of Commissioners are the ones that decide this, it lends itself to the fact that we can't see it on its final approval day in order to exercise that. That's the point I was trying to make.
We're the ultimate decision maker. It's the developers. They're at the mercy of us. They bring this plan forward at the risk that at the end of the day we're going to vote it down. I mean, I know that you're kind of couching it in terms of, well, what about the developer, the poor developer that might have to go back and pay his engineering costs? But at the end of the day, no offense to anyone in the line, but screw them. This is how the situation is. If they want to run the risk of putting forward a plan that we don't approve of, and they get to us and we say, well, you know what, we don't like it. I don't think it's a hardship for the developer to have to deal with it. But
I think
the other side of that coin is that we
I'll go back to, if I may say something, I'll go back to what Attorney Zader said in a meeting that we talked about this, that generally speaking, open space is when you have a big development. And I think an open space is what the township wants, generally speaking. And unless we're tight for funds and we need the money, but otherwise, in generally, we can agree to when there is a large development, we take land, and when it's a small development, we take money. It's just very simple. Very simple look at it.
That's not necessarily how it works, though. For example,
Why
the
doesn't-
warehouses that were approved over on Crackersport Road, it's 1 million square feet of warehouse, and land was not dedicated. It depends on the particular development and where it's located, and is the land suitable for development. And that's, what George was saying earlier, every piece of development has its own challenges and uniqueness, and it's a decision that needs to be made by the board, which is entrusted to us.
Yeah,
I was
but we
gonna
have
use that
staff, and I'm
Crackersport
not
warehouse
suggesting that.
example. I was going to use the
Staff is-
Crackersport warehouse example, building on what Diane just said, because the decision there for money versus land, I believe, was made by Parks and Recs. It's $500,000. Now, large development, large amount of money. We talked about scale at the last meeting. Certainly, that's a case that the Board of Commissioners should be on board early. It's a large financial decision versus land preservation in the middle of a large development, admittedly warehouses. That's the type of thing that we should be privy to and have input up front and make a decision up front, rather than have an advisory board make that decision, and then it gets passed to the Planning Commission, and then it gets passed to the Board of Commissioners, and then it's said to be too late.
You know what I love personally about the current system, the way it works right now, is that a developer will come into the township and they will say, okay, I get to deal with the boards, these various departments who are appointed as opposed to elected. I get an easy pass here. I get an easy recommendation here because, look, they're not going to, with all due respect to those boards and commissions, they're not necessarily, they don't have the answers to the public. And then the developer gets through all that, and they come to us, and then we get to actually invoke the and say, you know what? We don't like it. We don't like it. We're getting this thing out of here. And that will send a message to every developer that comes into South Whitehall Township that this isn't going to be an easy road to hoe. Because if we get involved in the nuts and bolts at the outset, if they get past us, that's it. They got one gateway to get through. But if you come to South Whitehall and you want to put in a huge development, you're gonna have to get through numerous advisory boards and then the commissioners who were elected by the people. So what I love about the current system is that, we get the support of board members who are much more savvy in the various, areas that are involved in development. We get those recommendations. We get safety recommendations, planning recommendations. We get all of this great information from intelligent and devoted people. And then we get to look at the developers and say, you know what? We may have these recommendations, but we were elected by the people, and we can tell you that we want to serve. So I like the way it's set up, and I would support maintaining the way it is now, so that it sends a message to developers and other people wanting to come into the township that we have a system in place that will ensure that only the best of the best of the best gets to build here.
I have to agree. I believe in the process. I believe we still have, the opportunity as commissioners to, make the final decision. But I think we need to put, the faith and in our staff and in the advisory boards that we have. That's why we put them there. And they have an important part to play in getting the plan or the process to hitting us. So I agree with Matt. I believe in the process the way it is. I certainly don't mind seeing it ahead of time, but I don't think we should be, bypassing the process by giving our input at a point where, we don't have all the information at that point. I think the advisory boards and staff, needs to play a key part in it. So
if I could interject a practical component to this from the perspective of the developer, just so you as a board can consider it. You are familiar already from past experience that on occasion, you will have a developer come before the Board of Commissioners to get your decision on waivers under the saldo. The reason that happens prematurely as opposed to waiting until the Planning Commission recommendation and the entire plan comes forward to you is because it involves critical design elements before the developer spends six figures on the engineering that goes into it. So that's why the developer comes before you for that. I would say that in terms of park and rec open space issues, across the board throughout the region, if there are 1,000 recommendations made by Parks and Rec, you'd be shocked to see one that wasn't followed by the elected officials. So my point is, if this board feels that you really truly might not want to follow the recommendation of Park and Rec, then I think what you're going to see is developers on their own, just like they sometimes do with waivers, will start to request to be on the agenda and get the decision of the board because they're not going to want to go back and redesign and spend effectively wasted money in the six-figure range because of a design that doesn't work. They're going to want to know up front. That'll be the practical ramification if that's the direction the township is thinking about going. It's not right or wrong. It's just an awareness for you so you can realize that will be the action.
But what would be the harm for the Board of Commissioners to see the plan after it goes to Parks and Rec for our review of it? We're not changing the process or diminishing anybody. We're saying as a governing board, we just updated our saldo to change it to say that a developer with 50 or more dwellings, has to come before the deciding board. I mean, we did those changes in December of 18. I assume there was a reason for that. I don't know the impetus with the CD department to get that going, but that was a change that was made. And I have to disagree with Commissioner Mobilio. If a final plan comes before us, I don't think that me personally, would ever send a developer back to the drawing board because of open space. That would be irresponsible financially. And the way that we can avoid that is having a quick review, and we don't even need to see the developer. We can have Parks and Rec hand it to us at our next meeting for our own review at the board. There's something to think about.
Listen, I think that there's no reason we should not have the recommendations as early as humanly possible. I mean, it doesn't really make sense for us to wait for them until 2 days or 3 days or a week before. So I agree with us getting involved early in the process in the respect that we get the information and the recommendations and everything as early as possible. I just don't think it would make sense for us to get involved in the voting or final decision-making process at the initial stage.
I know I'm not asking for the developer to come. I mean, I know Commissioner Mobilio, the first land development that we as a new board had to vote on was the KRE commercial. I mean, that's the final process. Everything's done. You really don't have a lot of input. It's yay or nay because of this path that George was so wonderfully showed us tonight, how many different boards it goes to. And if we can have a say early on to review it as well, I don't see the harm in that personally.
Well, I mean, there's nothing stopping us if we get the information early, like in the KRE project, for instance, if we got that info at the outset, which obviously none of us were, other than Tori, were on the board then. But if we got that info at the beginning, we could still express our concerns to the various departments that are, like, well, for instance, Diane, you're on the planning commission, right? So we can, that things could be addressed at planning commission. We could express to the Parks and Rec or whoever else is involved in that project to say, here are our concerns when we've had that initial information. I mean, we're not making a decision, but here are things that we want to see addressed at those initial early stages. Is that something we can do, or is that where we completely foreclose from being involved in that process?
Well, I agree with you. The point, I think we're both saying the same thing in a different way. We don't see it as a Board of Commissioners until it's final approval. We have no say in it at that point. So with this particular saldo that says that the Board of Commissioners has the authority to do this, I'm just asking the question, what would it harm us to see it in the review process after Parks and Rec looks at it, that we have an opportunity to exercise our authority to say yes or no, or do we half of this, half money, half land, all land, no land? It's certainly a discussion that I think we need to have.
The one thing I want to add is there is a difference if it's a preliminary only submission. So obviously, if you're just seeing a preliminary plan, you're seeing it before a final comes in. So you would have a lot of time then to weigh in, because they need to get their preliminary plan approval from you before they go back for their final plan submission. The more difficult situation, I would think, would be a preliminary final combination.
True,
so
you're right.
That might be a
we do something.
We seem to have a lot more preliminary finals lately. So.
Are we able to, like, just trying to kind of work the middle here? Do we have the ability or opportunity to, when we see a plan come in, right? So we get some kind of notification. Hey, here's what's coming through the pike. It's going to go through these various departments. Commissioners submit questions to those various other departments or boards, in case, just out of abundance of caution, to make sure that those issues that we see as commissioners get addressed. And that way we know that the early issues that may not have been addressed or potentially were not addressed by earlier boards and commissions have been at least answered to some degree by the time it gets to us for final decision making. Is that something that can be done? I mean, I don't want to put an incredible burden.
I would, yeah. Matt, I have to say I would definitely not support that approach, because I think what that would do is you'd have questions shooting to from every angle to the different departments. It bypasses the whole process structure. I think I like the fact that you're trying to meet in the middle, but I don't think this is a meet in the middle thing. I just don't think that would be a good idea. I wouldn't personally support that approach. I'm sorry.
I can tell you, going to the Parks and Rec meetings for the last 18 months, I'm very thankful for the work that they do. It takes them literally 5 minutes to make a decision on this. It's not something that would be a laborious thing for this board to look at a sketch or plan and give our opinion. It's not something that takes an hour. It's a short process.
Well, what if it was something like, as opposed to a question and answer session or a questions, it was just here are the Board of Commissioners, these various members have reviewed, chosen to review it and chosen to make these following comments. And then it's just, whatever those boards decide to ask for those comments, great. Whatever the developers decide to respond to, those comments are great. And if they don't, then that's something that unfortunately they have to answer to when they get to the final approval phase. In other words, it's not it's more of a just every commissioner has their opportunity to just put together a paragraph or two about their comments or concerns, and then they get read out in the public sphere at those various meetings, and whoever addresses it, great. If they don't address it, then they're going to have to deal with it at the final approval process, and then they can't complain that, oh, we went through all these approvals and now you're asking these questions and concerns and all this stuff. So we're able to put our input in, but we're not going down the process necessarily.
Well, again, I don't think we're slowing down the process to have the plan simply come to us after it goes to Park and Rec, just for us for a review. I'm talking about a 5-minute review that we as a board would give our thoughts. That's really what it would come down to.
But you're asking for so Park and Rec reviews it on their meeting night. The next day it comes out with a memo that says Park and Rec met this night and they're recommending, fee in lieu of or the dedication of the space. it goes to the next Board of Commissioners meeting. You all see it and say you're in agreement or not.
Basically, they meet on the third Monday of the month, and our meeting is usually the following Wednesday. I mean, it's just a matter of taking a look at their memo and seeing what's going on, what land is this that's being developed. You know, is this a case that we, as a board, would like to see space or fees given for this particular piece of property?
That memo actually comes from Greg in community development. That's not generated from the Parks and Rec department or the board.
But
Okay,
theoretically,
so
you could
on behalf
after.
of the board.
But theoretically, after that meeting, what you would like to see is for that recommendation for the space or the fee come to the Board of Commission like the following meeting or whatever. And
right, just with a plan to review. Yes.
And then you give a yay or nay if you agree or don't agree, and then it's done at that point, and you follow back up with the developer. Correct?
Correct. It goes back to its process as it has.
On the developer side, I would defer to Joe, but I would think that they would have to be invited to that discussion because you would be deciding what you want there, and they might have rationale for asking for something different. I don't know. I'm looking at Joe on that just to make sure there's no legal issues there.
I would definitely.
But I think you would have liked them.
Doesn't Parks and Rec do the same thing? They make that decision at their advisory board meeting, and the developer does not ever show up for that meeting.
Yeah, but the Saldo's leaving the final decision in your hands, so you're making a decision at that point.
We could affect the process. So we're not an advisory board. We're the final decision board. They're an advisory board, so they don't. That's why that doesn't apply.
Right, because they're not going to want to come to you twice. Right.
Right.
So my confusion then still is, our Saldo says that it is the Board of Commissioner that has this authority to do this, except by the time we get to it, we can't exercise it because it would be very unfair to a developer to send it back. So we're not exercising our ability to have any input on this.
Right, it's the timing issue, which is that's what I think I'm hearing. So if you did it earlier, like say after Parks and Rec makes the recommendation, you still got to make your decision. And so that decision needs to be binding. I think the developer needs to be there for that aspect.
I would agree with that. If that's the decision point. In other words, it would not make sense in my view, and I think it creates potential legal pitfalls if after the Park and Rec recommendation occurs, there's, I'll say, an informal discussion by the Board of Commissioners and 5 commissioners, 5 different thoughts on what should happen, and then that feedback goes to the developer to address and deal with. To me, that would not make a lot of sense. I think if it comes to the Board of Commissioners at the earlier stage, it should be for a decision, and then that sticks for the duration of the development planning process.
Thank you, Joe. I will say, I don't think it's fair to the developer to believe that they've got the matter settled at Parks and Rec or going through planning, and then they come to the Board of Commissioners and we deny it. I'm trying to be fair to the developers at this point as well as satisfy our Saldo and have our board involved in this process.
I mean, look, I did some construction when I was in college. I did a lot of different things, some plumbing and some electrical work. The day I rely on the various departments and commissions that we have to give me recommendations. I mean, I'm a legislator in this township. I don't profess to be someone who's knowledgeable enough at that initial level today. Here's what we should have as far as green space. Here we should have as not. I mean, I think any legislative body, Congress, the General Assembly of Pennsylvania, they rely on subcommittees. They rely on people to get down to nitty gritty. And I don't think that we should be, as commissioners, down to that level, because I just don't think that we're qualified to make those types of minute decisions. We should be relying on the people that have the expertise to make the recommendation.
Well, again, I will state the land use is a legislative decision, and our saldo speaks to it on many occasions, requiring it of the Board of Commissioners. So it's not something that I've made up. It's just part of our saldo.
Can I make a
I think
to amend the saldo to remove that from our purview? Can I do that right now?
No, that's not how it works, Ms. Movilio.
Oh, all right. Throwing it out there.
Unfortunately, it's quite a process, and we just amended it in, about a year and a half ago to add this in. So there was a reason why we added it in on the advice of the Community Development Department in our township.
Right, but we also added in without, and this, I'm not saying that Attorney Zader is in any way involved with, I don't know how this was amended, but there's obviously a gap here as a, with regard to when the commissioners can make that final decision. So if it was important for, in the legal world, I think Joe will focus, when there's an omission in a law or a statute, it's presumed to be intentional. And so in this particular case, if the omission is when the commissioner is called to be involved in that final decision, the presumption is that it was intentional to allow for other departments to review and make decisions and recommendations, and then make that recommendation to the board. So,
well, no, to be clear, Commissioner Mobilio, it's always been in there. We added in any development of 50 units or more. It's always been in there that the Board of Commissioners is the recommending body. We're the ones that make that decision. It's always, well, I shouldn't say always, but it's been in our saldo for a long time. And I don't know if Greg is still on the line, because I know that he has done a lot of work on this as well, but it's not a new concept. It's a matter of timing, and for us to be able to have an opinion on this, we can't wait until it comes to us for final approval.
right, but Diane, so just to be clear, I'm relying on you because I don't have the saldo in front of me. I don't know it as well as you do. Does the saldo say that we are the recommending body or the deciding body? So, because if we're the recommending body, who are we recommending to? If we're the deciding body, all that means is that we can base that information on other people who are recommending to us.
Well, I can read you a section just as an example. Should land deemed unsuitable by the board. So it's a continual throughout this, sections. It's constantly talking about whether the land is suitable or not, deemed by the Board of Commissioners. So if we're going to be deeming that, when do we do that? It needs to be early enough in the process that changes could be made or not.
But Diane, on the language that you're citing is saying that yes, we have final approval, but that does not forbid us from relying on other recommendations of other board members, or other bodies, or other. So yes,
I actually do have one more segment that does speak to that, Matt. If you would just indulge me for one moment, in section 31236. Fees in lieu of such an agreement shall be indicated through a motion by the Board of Commissioners in a public session after receiving a recommendation from the Parks and Rec Board regarding a proposed payment of fees in lieu of land dedication. Such an agreement shall be secured prior to preliminary final plan submission for all residential or mixed-use land developments containing more than 50 residential dwelling units. It actually does state that we should do this in a public session after receiving the recommendation from Parks and Rec. How do we do that, practically speaking, without doing it at the very end of the process for the developer?
Oh, but we're still complying with the ordinance. I mean, we are making a final decision. Yes, it may be unfair to the developer, but that's what our ordinance reads. Our ordinance reads, we get a recommendation from Parks and Rec, we make that final decision, and look, the developer has the same information we have, so they have the ordinance to say, look, we want to do business in South Whitehall, we got to deal with Parks and Rec, and then wait for that final decision by the Board of Commissioners. I mean, Joe, or anybody. I'm open for suggestions. My interpretation of what Diane read is that we get a recommendation, we make the final decision. I don't know how else to read what was heard there. What was read there.
This is Mike Walk. So after listening the past 15 minutes, I simply want to provide a feedback summary of what I've heard. I hear there's 3 different aspects
Joe,
of
can we
this.
just answer my question before you read back the whole summary? Can someone just answer? We indulged you when you had your numerous questions, and instead of responding to my question, you said, well, I just want my questions answered. Well, I would like my question answered before you repeat your summary of everything that happened tonight. My question is,
okay, I didn't hear your question.
I said it immediately after Diane's comment, and my question was, my interpretation of the statute as Diane read it is that we get a recommendation from the Parks and Rec Department or the Parks and Rec Commission, and then we make a decision based on their recommendation or whatever information else we want to consider. And if that is indeed how it was read and how it's interpreted, then we've been doing that. So I'm asking Joe Zader or anyone else who has insight other than the commissioners who have opinions about what it says. I'm actually looking for the legal interpretation of, does the saldo as read by Diane say that the Parks and Rec Department receives that information, makes a recommendation, and then the Board of Commissioners decides whether to accept it or reject it?
I'll be glad to answer that. Matt, your interpretation of the ordinance provision is absolutely correct. It's a recommendation by Parks and Rec. It's a decision to be made by the Board of Commissioners. And as far as I know, that's the way it has been happening. I think the pragmatic point of all this, though, is the one that Commissioner Kelly has made on several occasions, and it's this. If this is not going to, and I hate to use this phrase, but if the recommendation of the Park and Rec Board is not going to be a rubber stamp at the Board of Commissioners level, if you truly intend to scrutinize and possibly go a different direction from the recommendation of Parks and Rec, then I think from a legal standpoint, as well as a pragmatic and a fairness standpoint, that decision by the BOC should come early in the process and not at plan approval.
Would that require an amendment to the saldo?
I'd have to look at the language, but if I think I heard the language correctly, not necessarily. I would view it as an internal process modification in terms of how things get routed when. As
a majority decision by the board, or just an administrative decision?
I think based on the way the saldo is drafted now, it would need to be a BOC decision. So it would have to go to the board. It would be on the agenda. And as George recommended earlier, the developer should be notified that it's going to be on the agenda to be present.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. There's obviously a lot of still a lot of discussion and question on this particular topic and process on how we want to move forward with it, or if we want to move forward with it. So my suggestion is we kind of digest what we heard tonight. I think there's a lot of information to go through in our own heads to make a decision on any changes to, not necessarily to the process, but to how we see the information and when, and maybe revisit that at the next meeting, because I would like to kind of digest the information that we got tonight before I would make any type of agreement or recommendation to how we would move forward. Thoughts?
I would agree that we can certainly talk about this and put it on our agenda for our next meeting.
Very good. Very good.
And should we ask
all right.
The Community Development Department to assist? I mean, do you want to see that verbiage yourself from the saldo, or I mean,
I'm aware of what the saldo says. I think if I have any particular questions, I could probably just we can figure out, based on the comments that we got this evening. But I took some notes, and I just want to better understand the whole process and the different aspects that everybody brought into it this evening to see what the best direction is moving forward. I'm just not prepared to make that decision tonight myself.
Neither am I.
I understand. My question was if you wanted the community development to, any other members of the board need more information before we.
Absolutely. If there's specific information that any of the other board members would like, my suggestion is if you're going to put that request in through Renee, and Renee can feed out to, George and his team on whatever information it is, and make sure you copy, Renee will copy the full board so everybody gets the same information. Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Great. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
So is there anything else under direction and discussion items for this evening that is the pleasure of the board?
Yes, President Morgan, I have something I'd like to discuss.
Very good. Commissioner Mobilio.
Okay, so, the last time, I believe it was the last time we met, we discussed, and the board unanimously approved a motion directing the township staff to, I believe the exact language was, keep a critical eye on spending. And that was in an effort to ensure that our financial resources were being properly allocated in light of the current coronavirus crisis. And I think we were all in agreement on that, and there was no dispute that that was an important issue for us to address. In my opinion, equally important as the proper allocation of financial resources during a crisis is the efficient utilization of the township labor force in a time of crisis. And I was thrilled actually to hear tonight both Commissioners Walk and Kelly express their concern with utilizing public works and other departments for what arguably non-essential purposes during the current crisis. So I've been approached by several members of our administrative staff who expressed to me that they are under immense pressure as a result of performing their normal day-to-day duties in a fiscally responsible manner, as we've all agreed to direct, while simultaneously being inundated with time-intensive inquiries from individuals who are outside of the chain of command in the township. So I believe it's important in this time of crisis that there is a uniform and streamlined process to address new and existing issues that come before the township. This uniform and streamlined process actually once existed in the township back as early as 2010, and actually lasted for, I think, 4 or 5 years after. Back on August 4th, 2010, Ordinance 922 was adopted, updated certain provisions which related to the position of the township manager. Section 1.78 of that ordinance, of Ordinance 922, reads specifically as follows. Neither the Board of Commissioners nor any of its members shall direct or request of the township manager or any of the manager's subordinates the appointment of any person to or removal from office in any manner, report on the appointment or removal of officers and employees in the administrative services of the township. Except for the purposes of inquiry, the Board of Commissioners and its members shall address the administration of the township only through the township manager, whose action shall be directed solely by vote of a majority of the board. Neither the board nor any member thereof shall give orders to any subordinate of the township manager, either publicly or privately. Now, reinstituting this provision will help establish a uniform and streamlined approach to addressing new existing issues in the township. Accordingly, I am asking that the solicitor prepare an ordinance revising and amending sections 1.71 through 1.80 of the South Whitehall Township Codified Ordinances to include word for word the language of section 1.78 of Ordinance 922 to be advertised for a vote at the next board meeting. I think with application of this new ordinance, assuming it would pass, it would help relieve the pressure on our administrative staff and help streamline the process and relieve the tension and stress that the staff is feeling from the coronavirus crisis as it relates to the prioritization of township business.
Thank you, Commissioner Mobilio. Are you suggesting a motion then?
Well, yes, I will make a motion that the solicitor prepare the ordinance as I directed.
Commissioner Mobilio,
Right.
I apologize. I don't know what's going on with, maybe it's your computer or I'm on my phone. I heard every third word that you said. Could you don't need to say the entire thing. Can you recap the general theme of what you're talking about? I have no idea what you just said.
I am asking that the solicitor prepare an ordinance that revises and amends sections 1.71 through 1.80 of the South Whitehall Township Codified Ordinances to include word for word the language of section 1.78 of Ordinance 922 to be advertised for a vote at the next board meeting.
And what is this ordinance? I'm sorry. I do apologize. I'm having a very hard time hearing you.
Well, Commissioner Kelly, it's lengthy and I've read it, word for word. So I apologize that you haven't heard every word of it. And I'm happy to scan and email it to you at the conclusion of the meeting. But my concern is that if I read it again, you're going to be only hearing every 1/3 word as well. So I can read it again to the extent that you don't understand it or hear it. I just ask that you can confer with Solicitor Zader or review his ordinance. So I'll read it again for your consideration. Neither the Board of Commissioners nor any of its members shall direct or request of the township manager or any of the manager's subordinates the appointment of any person.
You can stop. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. There's something. Can you maybe back up from your microphone or something?
I am 2 feet away from my microphone, the same distance I've been the entire time of the meeting, so I don't really know what else I can do. If you'd like, actually, you know what I could do? I can hold up the ordinance to the camera, and you're welcome to read it or take a screenshot.
My eyes aren't that good.
Commissioner Kelly, I think this is the best that I could do. So you'll have the opportunity.
I apologize.
You'll have the opportunity to review it when it's proposed for the next meeting. But other than reread it twice and put it up to the camera, I mean, there's little else I could do to accommodate it. Do you have a recommendation for what else I can do to help you hear every word of the ordinance?
I can't. I'm sorry. I'm getting feedback or something on my phone.
If you put it up to your screen, Matt, maybe somebody else who sees it can read it from their phone. If you put it up, maybe Steve or George or even I can read the section you want me to read.
It's the section I've highlighted here.
All right. Let me make your. I'm going to go to only view your camera. Hold on. Who's talking?
Yeah, it's not going to come up.
Okay, hold on. All right, hold on here.
I don't know that I can make it big enough to read, unfortunately.
All right, if you leave it right, I can't. contractor.
It's unfortunate that the 4 hours we've spent on the phone, we've been able to hear every portion of this
Yeah.
meeting. This part.
Yeah, the audio is working, so I definitely will be on the taped version of this tomorrow when we load it up after I get it converted and downloaded.
Okay.
So
I can hear it.
it is working from that standpoint.
Thank you.
Well, I couldn't agree more, Commissioner Mobilio. I think a streamlined process for how information is fed to our township manager and ultimately through to staff, as well as the ability for the township manager to prioritize those requests is very, very important to the effectiveness and the efficiency of the operations of this township, and to the well-being of our staff. So I fully support it. I would second your motion, in other words.
If I could interject just for a moment, if I heard Commissioner Mobilio's motion, it was to advertise for adoption at the next meeting. If that's the case, I would just point out that there won't be enough time to advertise for adoption at the next meeting. The soonest it could be done is to advertise for the first meeting in June.
It has to be read, yeah.
Amending the motion to advertise the proposed amendment at the next available meeting, giving the appropriate time for advertisement.
I think before we, yeah, I apologize. There does need to go through 2 meetings prior. So, but I think it's important prior to doing any vote on this is to open it up for comments or questions to the board and then also to the public. So was there anything that the board, any other questions?
Again, I didn't hear what Commissioner Mobilio was saying, but Tori, I can hear you much better. So when you talked earlier about streamlining how information is, I didn't hear the rest of it though.
Matt, why don't you take a picture of it on your phone and send it to me, and I'll read it out loud.
Sure.
Or you can send it to me for that matter, and I can read it.
Sure.
That's even better.
That is an excellent idea.
I will.
Commissioner Stetton, while Diane is reading that, so Commissioner Stetton and Commissioner Wolf, did you have any questions or comments?
I just have a quick comment. I'm somewhat familiar with what Matt read. I think it's consistent with Chapter 50, which is the chapter that defines the township manager responsibilities. I think it's consistent with the orientation we received as new commissioners. I think it's fine.
Joe, did you have any comments?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Diane.
No, that's all right. Go ahead to Joe first.
Joe Stetton?
Did Joe have it?
Commissioner Stetton? Any comments, thoughts? His mic is green. Go ahead, Diane, till he chimes in.
Again, I apologize because I didn't hear everything that Commissioner Mobilio was saying, but are we're advertising again for an existing ordinance?
No, for modifications to an ordinance.
And
yeah, it's an existing ordinance. The suggestion is modifications. Did you?
I heard him say include. I heard him say include section 1.78, but I wasn't clear on that.
It is not.
Waiting for that.
Existing ordinance does not include section 1.78, but I'm recommending that it be.
And was section 1.78 removed at one point? Is that what?
That was.
It was removed?
Correct.
And do we know when it was removed?
In 2014, I believe.
2014. And do we know why it was removed? Just curious.
My understanding of why it was removed is because the then existing, then employed township manager was not adequately relaying information to and from the Board of Commissioners to the administrative staff. The reason it was initially added and instituted was because it was important for the then commissioners to make sure that there was a uniform and streamlined process by which all the administrative staff were actually receiving information, and there wasn't 5 different commissioners sending, inundating staff with emails and requests for information.
I heard every third word of what you said, so did you send
Well,
that to
Diana,
me?
it's unfortunate that for 4 hours we've had another conversation, but now when this issue comes up, you only heard every third word. I mean, I don't know what else to do.
What are you suggesting, Commissioner Mobilio? I can hear everyone else but you, so if there's a way to fix that, I don't know if it's your microphone or not.
For the last 4 hours, have you heard the words that I've been saying, every word?
I've heard bits and pieces of what you said, but you made a motion. I'd like to hear every word of the motion, and I didn't hear the ordinance. I don't have any reference point for what you're talking about, and I would just like to understand it.
Well, don't you think it would have been? Don't you think it would have been something to bring to our attention 4 hours ago that you couldn't hear everything that I was saying?
I heard the essence of what you were saying. We weren't voting on motion. You've been breaking up the entire evening.
And you.
So I think I'm going to interject here. Diane.
I've sent a copy. I've sent a screenshot
yeah,
of the.
I just got it. Thank you.
Every board member currently on this call.
Yep, received. I got it too. Thank you. And Joe, Commissioner Stetton, did you get, I just want to make sure because we haven't heard from Joe. Joe, have you seen? Joe's having technical troubles right now. Okay. And Steve, I don't have my chat on. Is there any questions or comments? Joe might have to respond.
I do not have any comments on this in the chat. And I'll try to see if I can unmute Joe, see if that works.
Yeah, see if you can get a hold of Joe. Well, if there's no further questions or comments, Diane, did you get a chance to read the
All right,
the
I think
addition?
I'm back.
Ah, he's back.
I'm back. I apologize.
So did you have, no apologies. Did you have any questions or comments on Matt's information and motion?
The comments I have is I think that it's a very good point for all the reasons that he said, that Matt said, but additionally I think also it will give us as commissioners the ability to be united on the questions that we ask and informed as to what's going on as a group.
Correct. Yeah. Well said. Thank you, Joe. All right. That being said, there is a motion on the floor from Commissioner Mobilio to move forward with the modification to said ordinance, passing that off to Attorney Zader for processing. I made a second on that motion. So if there's no further question or comment, we would be ready for a roll call vote. Commissioner Walk.
I'm sorry, I need a clarification. What exactly are we voting on? We're voting on having
a
Joe. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Advertising the proposed ordinance amendment.
Okay. I vote aye.
Commissioner Mobilia,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly.
I'm going to vote no. I want to get some more information on the background of this, of why it was removed. I want a clear understanding.
Commissioner Morgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Sutton.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Commissioner Mobilio. And Joe, I take it that the information will be forwarded to you for processing. So, all right. Is there anything else under direction and discussion items that we need to touch on this evening? Okay. We have old business. Renee, I'll just let you touch on any updates you might have on any of the old business items. I don't believe there's anything in particular, but I'll let you lead that one.
No. Aware Dam, no. Have not heard from the DEP on that permit. Campus renovation project, we're still waiting. They have restarted work, so we're looking at information coming from them when they're able to reduce some project timelines. Township digital platforms, we are wrapping up some interviews with potential providers, and we'll have a recommendation proposal on the May 20th Board of Commissioners agenda, and credit cards continue with a target date of June 30th.
Thank you, Renee. Did we, one thing I wanted to mention, it's not necessarily old business, but just for reference to anybody who's still left on the call, did we reopen, or when's the reopen date on the recycle center?
The reopen date on the recycle center is May 11th, and there will be, masks required and that type of stuff. We have added additional bins and are having a regular pickup. So hopefully, adding the larger additional bins is going to be helpful so that we can get people through. But Monday, May 11th.
Thank you for that update. Okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Is Steve Carr still with us? His video's off.
He's still with us.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike. Let me see if I can get back on. Sorry, I had to eat pie. I was hungry.
Okay.
I didn't want to eat in front of everybody.
I'm going to run down a list of questions. You're already aware of these questions because I've already asked you. These are questions with outstanding answers. So, first, we haven't received the entire ball construction status report, which they're required to provide per the contract agreement. We do need the entire status report. Request was first made in the middle of February, and we still don't have the entire report. So, is there a status update? Do you have the entire report? Can we have the entire report, please?
I do not have an entire report. I'm not exactly sure the definition of entire report, but I will look into it and look at their contract and see what entire report. I know we did give you the original timelines, the first major update of the timeline, and that's when COVID happened. So now we're waiting on them to update us on a supply chain and what it looks like, which is going to take them a few weeks to kind of get the ball rolling back again and try to work out those details. So
okay, so let me remind you that we've had a discussion on this. Maybe part of it was in the finance team. I sent you the contractual requirement for the project status report. I told you that I went into the Boyle contract and I transposed that information into an email to you that I sent a couple weeks ago. That's why I'm still awaiting the request, and I'm still raising the point now. So You're the contact with Boyle's project manager, Tony Ganguza. I request that you get familiar with what the entire contractual requirement is and obtain the information from Boyle so we all can have it. Mainly because this is the largest project that we have that we need to manage overall and have good cost management around.
You know, Mike, don't you, with all due respect, don't you think it's more appropriate to address these types of concerns behind the scenes as opposed to castigating our administrative staff in a public call?
I'm not castigating anyone. I made this request publicly last February, and I've made it on an ongoing basis. And all I'm highlighting is we still have it outstanding.
Right, but your request should be directed to Renee, not to administrative staff in the public domain to try to embarrass them.
I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. I'm being factual, and Renee's fully aware of this.
Well, then send an email privately and don't try to be a tough guy in the public and make the administrative staff feel like they're doing something wrong when they're doing the best damn job they possibly can given the circumstances.
I did send a private email, and I'm not criticizing or castigating anyone.
I also thought the board agreed with the kind of report we were going to give the report. And we did.
I missed the end of what you said. I missed the end of what you said.
We agreed that Boyle reports, we weren't getting detailed Boyle reports as the information became available. Staff back to the full board, not go to the different staff members individually asking for detailed information. So I think we need to revisit that past discussion we had at a board meeting that we all agreed upon. I think that's very important.
I agree with you completely. We agreed at a previous meeting that we would get the full report and it would be sent to the entire BOC. I'm not making any special requests.
That requires a majority, not just a conversation on the record. If we want to make a motion or request, we should be doing that by a majority vote and not going privately back to administrative staff and asking them to do various projects for us without notifying or otherwise involving the other board members.
We agreed this at the February BOC meeting.
Who agreed?
Okay, Mike, what's question number 2?
Am I permitted to ask the question? Okay.
Yes. Question number 2, moving on.
I'll skip through. I'll go to the most important question I believe that we need an answer to, which I've asked Renee and Steve. A cost summary was provided. My interpretation of the cost summary is that there is a $1 million cost overrun, which is 12% of the combined contract cost, and we are only 10% into the project.
Where's there $1 million cost overrun?
Well,
this is definitely something we probably should talk about before you bring up in the public, because there is not $1 million cost overrun, and now the media is going to be there's $1 million cost overrun. It's not. It's going to be misinterpreted.
Well, it doesn't have to be misinterpreted. I sent you an email that said, and Renee, that the cost report you provided seems to indicate a $1 million cost overrun at a very early point in the project. And I simply asked you to tell me whether that was correct or not.
I don't think it's correct. I apologize if I missed one of your emails in my 1,000 emails I get a day.
For a response.
I don't understand that.
This is ridiculous. This is absolutely insane that we are now stating as fact an issue that you haven't even confirmed or corroborated with anyone else. This is outrageous.
I'm not stating a fact.
You said
I'm asking a question.
You are, and you shouldn't.
Okay, what's your third question, Mike? Can we just move on with the questions?
I'm done.
Okay, that's all right. So Renee will talk with Steve and gather up as much information as we can possibly gather, and Renee will feed back to the full board. So we'll move forward from there. Are there any other questions or comments on old business? All right, then this is the opportunity for courtesy of the floor from our public on any non-agenda item. Is there anybody this evening who would like courtesy of the floor? Sorry, Brian Height did write in and ask for courtesy of the floor if he's still with us. Absolutely. Brian, are you on the call still?
Oh, this is my favorite TV show all night.
You're very patient. You're very patient.
I'll make this quick.
Okay.
I'll make this quick. 1273 Eck Road is my address. I just wanted to let you all know that Township employee Mike Elias did a great job helping me with a flooding issue at my residence on Monday. Without his assistance, my property would have been in much worse condition than it is now. So for that, I'm appreciative. Thank you. Good night. God bless.
Oh, Brian, thank you. That was well worth the wait. Thank you very much for sharing that. That was very much appreciated. Good job, Mike.
Ryan, kick-ass staff.
Anybody else for courtesy of the floor?
Tori, Lee Salt would like to have courtesy of the floor, please.
Sure. Lee Salt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. I even hate to bring this up, but a question about, I guess, Solicitor Zader. How does the Act 15 go with the Ridge Farm project that we have in front of us right now?
Commissioner Zader?
Yes, I was just getting off of mute.
Oh, sorry. Oh, we lost.
Lee, I'll address both components of Act 15 as it would apply. The Act, to the extent there are any public meetings involving Ridge Farm that are within this window of emergency as proclaimed by the governor, and also within the window of Act 15 itself, which as of today is through May 20th for the period of time for the suspension, the tolling, and really through the duration of the emergency as it relates to the conduct of public meetings. So putting that all together, what it would mean for Ridge Farm is that, and I believe they're scheduled for a planning commission meeting on the 21st of May, which is the next regularly scheduled planning commission meeting. For that meeting, it would be conducted virtually. I'm assuming a format similar to what we have this evening. I've not talked with the staff about that, but it'll comply, I'm sure, with the Act 15 requirement that I went over earlier in the meeting at a minimum, and the notices would be consistent with Act 15. And then as it relates to the tolling, the suspension of time periods, once the tolling period began by the submission of the preliminary plan by Ridge Farm, I'm not sure what that date was, but the tolling window that I explained, which began either March 6th or when the plan was submitted, if it was after March 6th, that tolling period would continue through the May 20th date, unless the statute is extended, in which case then the tolling period would continue.
Okay, thank you. My other question, I guess maybe this might not be the proper setting for it, but I guess it would go to Greg or some of the planning commission that's here tonight. Is there on the 21st? There's obviously this is going to be a very large go-to meeting. How are you planning on doing? They're proposing the whole thing. How is this going to happen? And is it going to be done in sections, or is it going to be done in how is it going to process? Because this could be if it's a whole thing, it could be twice as long as this meeting tonight.
Twice as long? Lee, don't say that, man. Come on.
I'm sorry, Matt.
I got to work tomorrow. I can't. I'm essential.
I have nothing else to do, so
Would somebody like to, George, would you like to chime in on that, on the
Well,
structure of the meeting?
it would be at the discretion of the planning chairman. I mean, if it got to a certain point where they, felt like they wanted to move it to another time, then I suppose, I would suppose if there's an agreement, they could do that. It's my understanding what they're coming for at this point isn't necessarily a review of the entire plan, but more about a look at some additional waivers and deferrals. So I think they're really just trying to get a pulse for where those recommendations may go.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anybody else for courtesy of the floor this evening? All right. I'd like Commissioner Morgan, may I ask a follow-up question that came to mind just based off of what Lee Holt just asked? When Mr. Zader answered the question about that this meeting will take place the day after the tolling for Act 15, it's also possible that that might be extended, and if the act is extended another month or 2 weeks or whatever, what does that do to that planning meeting then?
I'd be glad to answer that, Diane. First of all, the tolling period, which concludes as of right now on May 20th, has no bearing on the conduct of virtual meetings. That part of it continues under the statute until the governor's emergency is concluded. And my read of the statute, although it does not explicitly talk about the governor's red, yellow, green approach, I think it's going to apply regardless, as long as there's any emergency in place. But as far as the tolling goes, is that if it's extended, it will be up to the town to decide to delay the conduct of future rich farm. Not.
Can't hear you.
Couldn't
I was not able to hear you. I'm sorry.
I'll move a little bit. Is it any better right now?
It is better. Thank you.
Okay. It is better.
I heard the first half, but I didn't hear the tolling part.
Okay. The tolling period right now concludes. The scheduled planning commission meeting is May 21st. So
Unmuted.
So if the statute is extended, what that would mean going forward is that it's up to the township to decide whether to have any review of any rich farm or not. As of right now, we have a meeting scheduled. And even if the statute is extended, I believe that with that meeting already being advertised and having, I understand, being discussed between staff and developer, I'm assuming the May 21 meeting is going to occur regardless.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sure.
All right. There's no other comments or questions for courtesy of the floor. I'd like to note that our invoices and purchasing requisitions have been reviewed by the township manager and the director of finance. We need a motion this evening to authorize that our checks be issued to pay our bills as tabulated. Do I hear said motion?
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Stetton. Do I hear a second? Second. All right. Second from Commissioner Kelly. Can I have a roll call vote, please, Renee? Commissioner Walk.
Aye.
Commissioner Mobilio.
Aye.
Commissioner Stetton.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly. Aye. Commissioner Morgan. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. We do not have any executive sessions planned for this evening, but I would like to have somebody make a motion for adjournment, please. So moved. We have a motion for adjournment from Commissioner Kelly. Do I hear a second? I'll make a second from Commissioner Morgan, and I'm just going to do an all in favor.
Aye. Opposed? Nay. Keep going. Keep going.
So thank you, everybody, for your patience this evening. Please stay safe and healthy and have a wonderful evening. Thank you. The meeting is officially over.
Thank you.